Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Godlike Naruto refuses to return to Konoha. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Varrukh and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. A hero appears. She was running on pure adrenaline now. She was fast approaching the stage of giving up on her fight for her very survival as she began to feel her body grow tired and worn out. She was currently standing staring at her opponent at that one moment in time. Her breathing was coming in heavy and inconsistent breaths. She was standing within a crater no larger than herself that had been created when a great force was applied to her body that she had somehow managed to fend off. But that had come at the cost of the last of her chakra, and just now she was only running on enough chakra to keep her alive. In short, she was fucked. On both sides of her were the three that would be her team. They were all barely just out of the academy, and were on their first C-ranked mission. What a catastrophe of a mission it had turned out to be. It reminded her of one she had heard about in her past, where a simple C-rank turned into an A-rank. Coming out of her momentary reverie, she looked over the one who had caused so many problems for her and her team. The man opposite them was a rogue ninja from the village hidden in the clouds. They were a tall man of maybe 6 feet or so, and were also fairly muscly too. His head was adorned with short green hair that had a golden zigzag running down the center of his head. His eyes were what were causing her and her team the problem, however. How the man had come to procure the eyes was a mystery even to her, but she knew that there was no good reason that the man currently had them. He had the Sharingan, the eye jutsu that should have been wiped out except from a few extenuating circumstances. Behind her, her team were all taking in their rugged breaths too. She spared a glance at the three of them in order to assess how well they were all doing. Sadly, they were not faring that very well. Her team consisted of 3 girls, surprisingly enough, although it may have seemed strange at the time of placement. To their sensei and the Hokage, the team made perfect sense. There was Hyuga. She was a very outspoken girl who, although might not be sure of her physical abilities, was sure of her gift of the gab. She wore clothes that resembled the attire that Hinata Hyuga used to wear, with the only difference being that her jacket was black instead of the same gray as Hinata's. One thing that separated her from her clan the most probably was the fact that her hair was not the black hair of most Hyugas. Instead, her hair was blonde, very bright blonde. She was somewhat of an anomaly within her own clan. She was at least lucky that the head of the main branch was on her side. There was also Noma Vidya. She was a very shy girl that would be the almost exact duplicate of Hinata in her early days. Noma, despite being of only 12 years of age, was already viewed by those that knew her as beautiful. She had long purple hair that was tied into a high ponytail. Her eyes were a beautiful indigo color too, to match her hair. Her clothing consists of black shinobi pants and battle sandals. She had on a white t-shirt that was covered over by a gray jacket. She was currently bent over with her hands on her knees, breathing heavily while trying to keep her eyes on her enemy. Last but by no means least, was Kyoki Yuhi, the daughter of the late Asuma Sarutobi and Karana Yuhi. She had her parents' deep black hair and her mother's deep red eyes. She wore clothes that looked much like the ones her mother used to wear, but these were instead of white and red attire. The colors were different and were black and green, really giving her an outfit that defined her perfectly. She, like both of her teammates, was tired but was currently just behind her sensei's leg. At her sensei's instruction, of course, otherwise she would have been standing side by side with her. It would appear that you Konohanin have gotten to use to the Sharingan being used to help you, that when it is finally used against you, there is no way you have to combat it. The man before them spoke in no real definitive tone at all. He just simply spoke to them, pointing out the information they already knew. We haven't been used to the Sharingan being on our side. There are no Sharingan users left in Konoha besides Kakashi-sensei, and it can't be passed on genetically from him, Hiku, answered the man before them. His attention turned to her, and he noticed that she had the pale eyes of the Hyuga. He felt a grin spreading across his face as he stared into those spare expanses of silver. Hiku swore that she saw the Tomo in his Sharingan spinning wildly before stooping in place again. Is that so? Then I guess the Sharingan is almost a dead Kekkai Genkai, almost then, isn't it? The man asked rhetorically as he indicated to his pair of eyes with a smile. Noma lifted herself up from her knees and looked across to the man who was opposite them. On closer inspection, she looked to the clothes that the man wore, but was stopped when she noticed the clothing he was in fact wearing. Billowing in the wind was a symbol that was thought to have long since lost its meaning. Ever since the 4th shinobi wore that symbol, and what it represented had been lost. Akatsuki. Noma breathed fearfully as she took in the man's attire. It was indeed the Akatsuki cloak that the man wore. The black cloak with the red clouds adorned all over. This man now wore the clothing that signified him as a dangerous enemy ninja, but there were 2 circumstances in which the man was wearing these clothes for. First of all was that Akatsuki was reforming, and he was part of the elite caliber of shinobi that were drafted by the Akatsuki. The second possibility was simply that he had procured the cloak from somewhere, and wished to take the image that the Akatsuki had left in order to gain himself a name. To all extents and purposes it had done what he had wanted. He was called the Red Dawn simply on account of the red clouds across the black cloak. You are correct, little girl, I am Akatsuki. I possess the Sharingan, am one of the elite shinobi of Akatsuki, and have managed to beat you all back without the use of my Sharingan. If you give up now and become my slaves, then your lives will not be forfeit, the man said with the tiniest hints of enjoyment within his words. All of the girls noticeably grimaced at the very thought of handing themselves over to the vile man that claimed to be part of the elite criminal organization. But what other choice did they have? The three girls looked at each other. They were out of chakra and ultimately out of luck. Resigning themselves to their fate, they began to move off only to be stopped by the outstretched arm of their sensei. Do not listen to his misleading words, she hissed to them as she turned to them. Oceanic blue eyes looked to them through a disgusted scowl. One eye was hidden behind the long blonde bang, but they could still feel its piercing glare upon them. The girls were all dumbstruck on what their next move should be and were only capable of standing still. Even their sensei was out of chakra, and if she was, then they had not many other options. Ino-sensei, we are all out of chakra, what other options do we have? We will die otherwise, came the voice of Kyoki, the shakiest that Ino had ever heard it. That instantly struck a chord within the woman, and she turned away from them. Run, Ino said to them as she stared at the enemy before her. Her entire squad stood still dumbfounded after the words spoken to them. They could not deny it was an order, but such an order was ludicrous. To leave a comrade in battle was most unfitting of a shinobi of the Leaf Village. Ino suddenly turned on them, and with her face contorted in almost evident fear, she screamed at them. Run! She screamed at the top of her voice as the three girls took a step back at the abruptness of Ino's movement. There would be no point in doing that, my dears. Even if you three were to run, I could easily overpower your sensei and then capture you three. If you simply kneel down right now, we need not go through much hassle, the man said as suddenly he was right in between all of them. Ino was not ready for such a hasty movement on the man's part, and was sloppy to react. In short, she turned around quickly to find that Kyoki was standing with the man directly behind her, his arm around her neck a little too tightly. The other two girls were lying on the ground away from the pair, clearly shot out of the area. His gaze moved from Ino to the girl in his hold, and Ino shuddered when she saw the man's tongue come out of his mouth and lick his lips. A little underdeveloped, but given enough time I can see you becoming a very well-endowed lady, if you catch my drift, the man said with a lecherous grin as he brought his attention back up to the blonde-haired woman before him. He could see the hatred and anger brimming up within her eyes, but that was also accompanied by the sheer hopelessness that she was feeling right now. She simply could not do anything at all to save her student, couldn't do anything to alleviate the terror the girl was going through. Do not ever doubt the power of Akatsuki. Those who were part of the group before I were weak-minded fools who did not know what power they could have, but I know the power I can control. With my influence I can control the world through the fear of the people. That is what the aim of Akatsuki should have been. World domination. The man finished as he looked to the sky, almost as if anticipating something climactic to happen. Let go of my student now, you sick fuck, Ino ground out as she made to move towards her student and the pervert that wanted to hold her. The man smiled at the way in which Ino had talked to him, and also the fact that a woman with little chakra left thought she command him. A woman thought they could command a man, him. How ludicrous this idea was that he burst out laughing. You honestly believe that you can command me to do anything, woman? You serve one purpose in life and one only, that is to tend to the needs of men, the man shot back at her as his boisterous laughter permeated through the air at her current predicament. Ino felt the sting to her pride in the manner in which the shinobi spoke of women, but did not allow it to bother her, as she knew she had one last bet to take on. The arsehole before all avenues had been checked off the list, and they were not destined to leave this place. I am sorry to say, but I disagree with what you have to say about women and men, and I will be taking back my student. Ino yelled as she forced her right palm forward towards the man's face, which caused him to move backwards in order to dodge the hit. In the process he let go of the girl within his grasp. Ino dodged around her student and continued on the offensive. She sent another fist crashing forwards, this time closed, and felt her knuckles brushing against the skin on his face. She took great glee in the surprised look on the man's face. Bringing her right fist up a second time, she intended to use an uppercut on the man until she felt the momentum in her hand stopping suddenly. Looking to her hand, she could see it covered by a larger scarred hand that belonged to the man in question. Women should not try to hurt men, otherwise they must be disciplined, the man said with an evil glint in his voice. He forced her arm out in the opposite direction to what it should move and made Ino move in that direction due to the pain. With her side left wide open, the man sent his foot crashing into her side and caused her to go flying in that direction. She was only stopped when a tree suddenly got in the path of her intended flight. Slumping to the ground, Ino felt the last of her consciousness going with it. Ino's team were all standing in petrified silence as they watched the man finish off their sensei. When she slumped against the tree and did not rise again, they knew that she had been finished. They knew she could fight no more. They would not let her sacrifice die in vain. They would fight too, and they would not give their bodies up willingly. All three nodded to each other and charged forward. Their varied war cries were screamed as they ran. Without any warning, however, a yellow and white blur appeared before them. It was as if he had simply materialized from thin air. Actually, to be more specific, he technically did just materialize out of thin air. Suddenly in front of the three girls was a man of about the same height as the first, unruly blonde hair and a white cloak on his back that had orange flame designs at the bottom of the cloak. Also on his back was a large scroll. All three of the girls had to stop suddenly or else run into the back of the man who had suddenly made his appearance. Who are you? The man in front of them asked loudly towards the man opposite him. His voice was rough and rugged, and by the way the girls watched the man with the Sharingan, that voice had effects it did not have on them. His eyes dilated in evident annoyance, but also hidden within his eyes was blatant fear, in its most primal form. The man took a step backwards in his more evident fear now. You, what the hell are you doing here? The man screamed at the blonde-haired man. He simply cocked his head to the side before he gave his answer. Why? Well, first of all, you are a danger to this world and your name makes you out to be strong. More than that, however, you are a man fighting against a group of girls. While I may not wish to trample upon their pride, that is not the way a gentleman treats a lady. Nor a group of women, the man answered back slowly as he took in the appearance of a man who was staring his greatest fear in the eye. Women are less than men. They should not be treated as equals as they are the servants. They make sure the men's needs are attended to, the man shouted back, forgetting about his fear then and there in his annoyance that this man was another who believed in equality. He was not prepared when the man in front of him began to laugh. It started off as a chuckle but escalated into a full-blown laughter directed towards the man in question. You are exactly the type of man that I hate. Those who think women are not worth the dirt on their boots. I treat women as equal because I realize that in order for the world to continue forwards and show them that there are those that care, I have to treat them as equals. How else do you expect love to happen? If you treat a woman as if she is a slave, then she does not love you, that is dependence. The man chorused off in his obvious anger towards the statement of the Sharingan user. The man with the Sharingan stepped back at the rage-fueled words of the blonde-haired man. He was definitely scary with something he believed in. It does not matter in this situation anyway, the blonde man started as he turned towards the three girls. They were now able to see him from the front and were now a little more understanding of why the man opposite them was so scared of him. The man was about 6 foot tall and had unruly blonde hair, as they already knew. He had a large white cloak that covered over mostly black attire, such as shinobi pants, black undershirt and black battle sandals, besides the white armor that covered his torso. There were also shoulder guards just under the cloak. It was not his figure that was imposing, not in the least. What scared the three of them and the other shinobi they guessed was the mask that he wore. His mask was what looked like it was Hunter Nien's standard issue, but it was so much more sinister than any they had seen before. There was a grin painted onto the mouth area of the mask. It looked like it had been scraped out of blood. The entire mask itself was completely black in contrast to the usual white color of Hunter Nien masks. The only other difference was the kanji written at the top of the mask. Akuma. Kyoki squeaked as she read the word that was etched into the forehead of the mask that the man before them wore. They could not see through the eye holes of the mask, and that scared them even more. You really are the devil everyone calls you. You sprout such shit about equality of women, then turn your back on me and focus on those girls. Are you afraid that my reasoning is correct and that I have the better beliefs? The man asked, gloating as he could tell that each of the words he spoke was definitely getting through, or so he thought. The guy behind that mask was definitely not showing any physical signs of those words affecting him. Unfortunately for you, I am only turning my back on you for one reason. I am making sure that these three are. The man was unable to finish his sentence, as a heel came crashing down on the back of his head, and slammed his face into the ground. The assailant done a backflip off from the position they had ended in, and landed just in front of the girls. Ino whipped her hair to the side and it fell over her back into its usual position. Her outfit had generally stayed the same. She had the purple sleeveless shirt still. Over the purple sleeveless shirt was her jonin vest, and she wore the black pants most jonin wore. Her face was one of evident fury right now. She had woken up only to find her students at the mercy of a second man who had entered the area, so she leapt into action. Although she had used a burst of her emergency chakra and was dangerously close to the edge now. "OW!" came the voice of the man whose face was currently on the ground. He rubbed the back of his head as he spoke the words. Leaning back slightly, he tried to look up but noticed before he lifted his head that his mask was shattering. And here I wanted to keep my identity a secret until I completed my mission. I guess I failed that bit anyway, the man said as he lifted himself to a sitting position. That was when Ino saw them, those cerulean blue eyes that she had not seen in years. Well, one of them to be exact. The mask he wore was now shattered across the right eye area, and she was afforded the sight of a man she had lost all track of communication with. He had certainly grown in the expanse of time that she had not seen him. His face was more rugged and looked so much more handsome than his childish face that she last remembered. Before she could even ask his name, there was a flash of chakra, and suddenly the man with the Sharingan was behind her old friend. With hand seals that moved faster than she had ever seen since her days during the war, the man brought his hands to his mouth before shouting, "Katon, Gyokaku no Jutsu!" With the command in place, a large ball of fire erupted from his mouth and completely covered the form of the man before her. Naruto! Ino screamed in fear for her friend. He had not any opportunity to even dodge that hit. But it also showed to her that she and her team were definitely at risk if the enemy shinobi could pull off things like that. Add to the equation that all four of them were dangerously low on chakra and they stand little to no chance. The blazing inferno that surrounded Naruto receded slowly. Ino and her team were afforded the sight of watching as the flames got smaller until they were in an almost spherical shape. Eventually the flames died away completely and revealed Naruto in a sitting position with his legs and arms crossed, more looking like he was meditating. He was facing the team of 4 women in his current state, and once the flames had completely disappeared, he snapped his head upwards and stared directly into Ino's eyes. Ino was entranced within his eye. They held so many things at once it was impossible to describe. His eyes danced with so many emotions it was almost as if an intricate play was being conducted across them. His eye told of his happiness at seeing her but also told of his distinct fear of the current predicament. It was that same eye that momentarily changed, but she had not missed it. She had seen his eye flash to purple with concentric circles, alongside 3 tomo on each circle, making 9 tomo visible. After she had blinked, however, she noticed that the visage was gone, and his beautiful and honest blue eyes were back. "Ino-chan, it's been a while," Naruto said to her, and done something that she had only ever seen Kakashi do. He gave her a nice smile. "Are you girls okay? Has he hurt any of you?" Naruto asked them seriously again. The 3 girls behind her shook their heads. They took Naruto's soft voice and his obvious familiarity with Ino as a sign that he could be trusted. Naruto then looked to Ino for her response, only to find the woman kneeling staring at him, while he sat. "No, he hasn't, Naruto. Who would have thought that I would still need to be saved from you, huh?" Ino asked the man before her, who flashed her his sexy fox grin that sent shivers up her spine. She definitely missed that smile. "Okay, good, don't worry girls, I'll finish this bastard off and have you all home before the night is out," Naruto responded to her, flashing his eye smile again. He then twisted on the spot and pushed himself back onto his feet in a rather acrobatic way. "You are going to save those women then?" the other man complained as he let loose a heavy sigh and moved into a fighting position that had his legs spread far apart to support his weight. His arms were out wide with both of his palms facing in front of him. Naruto looked at his stance in surprise. "You possess a Sharingan yet you use the stance of a Hyuga. You truly are a pain in the ass, shinobi," Naruto complained before he mirrored the stance himself and grinned at the face pulled by his enemy. "Do you think you are the only one outside of the Hyuga who knows this fighting style? I learned it a long time ago. Let's see who is strongest, shall we?" Naruto asked with a grin before he charged across the land towards his opponent. His fist drove forward with his middle and index finger pointing outwards. The man batted his hand away with an expulsion of chakra to the back of his hand and jumped away backwards. "Don't worry, Kuroha. I will make sure that you wished you did not procure those eyes. Your death shall be painful," Naruto said to the man coldly as he stood straight again and looked towards Haruza directly. Needless to say, Haruza was panicking now. If Naruto was as powerful as he was made out to be during the Fourth Shinobi War, then he was doomed. Chapter 2: A Hero Prevails. Naruto and Haruza stared off over the barren landscape that they both currently inhabited. Ino watched in complete silence as the 2 warriors faced off silently. She could not, however, shake off the feeling that where all of them were currently situated was somewhere she had been before, and to be honest, it was really starting to hurt her head as she continued to think about it. There was something about the petrified trees that surrounded her, and her team, that had her strangely wondering why this place brought back such an oppressing and dark feeling. In the pit of her stomach, Naruto moved his hand up to his face. For the barest of moments he saw a spark of fear race throughout the body of Haruza. Naruto smirked as he guessed his reputation preceded himself. Of course no one called him the demon for nothing. Naruto moved back into the Hyuga stance and grinned towards his opponent when he noticed that Haruza seemed to seriously be thinking twice about facing off against Naruto. There truly was little hope for anyone against the demon, or so he had been told. "If you do not wish to fight me, then you had better leave here," Naruto told the man as his head snapped up to look at Naruto incredulously. There was no way that he was given the option to simply walk away from this. It was too good to be true. "First of all though, you have to take out your eyes," Naruto told him in a manner that was far too calm for what it was that he was asking. So out of character was it that Haruza sputtered on his own saliva as he digested what Naruto had said. Take out his eyes? How the hell could he do that? What the fuck are you talking about? I can't take these eyes out, Haruza screamed in reply, and Naruto crouched down, almost looking like he was ready to pounce, and with his next motion he made it clear that it was in fact the intended idea. "I know that, I just always give that option to those who stole the Sharingan. Kinda makes my conscience feel better," Naruto answered as he lunged across the ground towards Haruza. Haruza stood stock still for a few moments before Naruto was finally upon him, and he was forced to again backhand Naruto's strike aimed for his chest. He could see that it was in fact red chakra that was expelled from Naruto's hand. He was serious, and this chakra was meant to kill. Haruza spun quickly in order to dodge a chakra strike that was going to be directed at his stomach this time. He could feel as the length of Naruto's arm ran across the small of his back near the bottom, and recalled just how close that hit had been from ending his life so suddenly and so neatly at the same time. Ino watched in slight surprise too. Never had she seen chakra as red, blue of course, as it was the usual color it went when it was strong enough to be seen. But red made her wonder just what in the hell was going on. That was not all that was making her wonder about the blonde-haired man who was essentially saving them. First on her mind was the way that he was acting. Forget the fact he was using a clan-specific taijutsu. His very demeanor seemed different, seemed almost dangerous and, dare she say, sexy? Then there was that flash of a change she had seen in his eye. It looked like it was a Sharingan, but at the same time it didn't. It was strange for her to try and think about. She saw the telltale signs of the Sharingan through the tomo that were within his eye, but he had concentric circles in his eyes too that she had never seen since No Way. Naruto struck at Haruza again, and was not prepared for the fact that as Haruza sidestepped his attack, Ino was directly behind him. Naruto could see the shock written across Ino's face, and Ino was finally able to see Naruto's eye again. She was right, the eyes were that man's. Besides the tomo within the concentric circles, they were that man's. The man who had basically destroyed the Leaf Village. As Naruto closed in on her, she could see fear crossing over those eyes that had been lifeless the last time she had seen eyes like those. Naruto suddenly phased out of his position in front of her, and was behind her, breathing heavily. That was too close, Naruto complained as he took deep breaths. Ino twisted around to see Naruto looking down at her with wide eyes. What he was so close to doing to Ino clearly had him worried about her welfare. She could see what his strikes were intending, and he knew what they intended. Both knew that had that hit Ino there would have been some serious repercussions. Sorry Ino-chan, that won't happen again, Naruto said, trying to assure her to the best of his ability. Yet she knew it was not for her sake, it was for his own. He had almost struck her, and it scared him. Naruto moved around the grounded woman in front of him, and stood facing the slumped-over form of Haruza. The man was taking deep breaths, and Naruto knew fine well why. First of all was simply the fact that he had his Sharingan activated, and since he was not an Uchiha meant that he did not build up the resistance they had to the Sharingan's effects. Second of all was the fact that Naruto's assault on him had been relentless. It was his way of dealing with his enemies. If he could tire them out, then he could beat them. It was a simple, tried and tested method. Why mess with something that works? Will you still try to resist? Naruto asked coldly towards his opponent. Haruza simply looked up from where he was currently slumped over. Naruto was standing in front of the woman in a protective stance, it would appear. Haruza took a deep breath and finally straightened himself out and looked directly at Naruto. I am Akatsuki. My domination will come to fruition. Haruza yelled out before he charged across the battleground again. The Hyuga style forgotten to him before he had even used it in their battle. Haruza sent a fist directly at Naruto's face, which he caught with slight trouble. That's not all, Haruza yelled before his other fist came screaming up towards Naruto's face. Phoenix Talon, Haruza yelled as his fist flew at Naruto's masked face and suddenly took on the visage of a fiery talon, opened and ready to pierce at Naruto's face. Naruto's face grew to look much more feral before the impact of Haruza's fist. The talon of fire licked at his mask, and with a crack the mask broke. Naruto grunted in surprise as his mask was shattered. He could see the look of almost accomplishment on Haruza's face, and felt a chuckle rising to his mouth. Well, I guess it was time to drop the guys anyway, wouldn't you say so? Naruto asked the man who was suddenly looking at Naruto as if he were mad. Didn't he want his identity to be kept a secret? Why would he so suddenly not be bothered about it much? What the hell are you talking about? Haruza asked his enemy in confusion as the blonde-haired man turned to look at Haruza again. He could see the face of his enemy now. Both eyes were purple with concentric lines but also had 3 tomo in each line, making 9 tomo in total. He had 3 whisker marks on each of his cheeks. Scariest thing of all was his uncanny resemblance to the Yondaime Hokage. If it wasn't for the eyes, Haruza would have sworn he was looking at the Yondaime incarnate. Simple. After I defeat you, my mission is over and I no longer have to hide my identity, as all of my possible enemies have been destroyed, Naruto answered back simply, not realizing the impact he had on those around him. Haruza panicked. Naruto had destroyed all who had opposed him until now, so that meant that he was last on Naruto's list. It also meant that Naruto had fought and beat some seriously top-notch ninja. Haruza knew of some who did not like Naruto, and actively seeked him out for a fight. Needless to say, Haruza did not see them after they had left right enough. So this was it? His last battle? He might as well go out with a bang. Ino was simply watching him in strict amazement. How many had he fought if that was the case? He seemed utterly relentless, and so much more powerful than she had last seen him at the end of the 4th Shinobi War. She had heard of at least 15 strong shinobi being found either dead or beaten close enough to death in the past, with one thing in common. They had either 1 or 2 eyes of Sharingan origin. It was only now that Ino finally put the pieces together. No way, Naruto had definitely become strong if he was able to take on those who possessed a Sharingan. The trio of girls who were currently crouched down behind and to the sides of their sensei respectively felt fear. This man was dangerous, and they could simply tell that directly. They had seen the way that Naruto had acted and just how close he had come to hitting their sensei. They understood it was accidental, of course, after witnessing the way that he had tried to evade hitting Ino, but that did not help their fears subside. They were afraid of the man they had been forced to fight, and currently Naruto was running rings around him. It only made sense that their fear changed to the one who was now the stronger. Is that so? In that case, then I won't make it easy for you, Haruza yelled as he raised his hand into the air. Then around his hand suddenly chakra became visible and sparks of lightning began dancing over his hand. How do you like this? My right eye grants me an ability I would not have otherwise. Chidori! The man shouted as suddenly his laughter echoed throughout the whole area they were within. Naruto stood still, nothing happening. The only telltale signs of something happening was Naruto's hands gripping tighter and small trickles of blood seeping down his knuckles. He was literally gripping so hard that his nails were digging into his palms. You bastard! Naruto seethed out. Ino in shock could not understand why Naruto seemed to have changed so much. It was only an ability that was afforded because of the Sharingan. You took his eyes. You took his eyes. Naruto roared as his head snapped back and Haruza was able to see the face of fury that was Naruto. Thunder clapped above them as suddenly the skies above turned from the rather nice sunset to a dark and dreaded overcast. Lightning bolts could be seen running through the clouds. All around, Naruto chakra gained physical form as it danced around his body almost as if it was afraid to touch him. Haruza watched in awe at the change in weather, and then looked over to Naruto in order to find the man with a rage-induced face staring directly at him. Naruto extended his own hand upwards and mirrored Haruza's motion from earlier, with lightning covering his hand as it was raised in the air. I will show you the gift that Sasuke left me. And what you tried to steal from him. Naruto screamed at the top of his voice as he felt the charge in his hand growing ever larger. With lightning cracking in the sky above him, he sent the powers of Chidori high into the sky and felt his chakra mixing with that of nature. Now witness the end of your trepidations. Naruto yelled before he brought his arm down at a 90-degree angle, and as his arm done so, a massive lightning crack formed into a Korean dragon of pure lightning and charged towards Haruza. So shocked at the sheer brutality of such a move, Haruza was unable to dodge the beast as it screamed towards him. Kirin! The Korean dragon did not hesitate and smashed into Haruza with enough force that the ensuing explosion caused much of the earth to shake and quiver. Ino and her squad felt the effects of the blast as they were front-view observers. As debris and dust was kicked up, Ino moved to protect her squad but found her body unable to move. In fear, she turned to look to her squad of girls to see them all with fearful looks on their faces, but also that of determination. That was when she realized to her pride that they had learned her fundamental lesson. Teamwork is the most important thing to a shinobi. Ino waited for the inevitable to happen, for her and her squad to be crushed under some force or another. What they had not expected was such a sudden warm embrace around them for the barest of seconds before they were thrown to the ground. Ino grabbed for her team and rolled onto her back with her arms around the three girls. When he back impacted, though, her arms opened wide and they all fell to the ground. With another thud, another body landed on the ground not too far away from them. Ino was the first to sit up after coming to a complete stop and looked around her at her surroundings. This was not the place they had been a few moments ago. And why did it feel like she had an arm around her body a second ago, and now she was in a new place with her team? She heard a groan to her left and looked around cautiously. There in a lump on the ground was the body of the man who had caused that devastation. Naruto Ino said more to herself than anyone else. That did not mean that it had went unheard, of course. Sorry about the rough landing, Ino-chan, and girls. I haven't tried to carry 4 others with me when I used the Hiroshima no Jutsu, and it was kinda hard, Naruto said to the ground below his face before he tried to get back onto his feet. He was shaky at first but was able to steady himself eventually after much effort. You're right, it was a rough landing, but I guess it's better than death, right girls? Ino asked as she looked over to where her entire team were starting to get onto their feet. All of them looked to her, and after thinking over what she had said, all at the same time, the girls nodded their heads. Anyway, I do apologize, Naruto repeated as Ino looked at him again, this time with a look of honestly. Really, Naruto, don't worry about us. You were the one fighting, so you should worry about yourself, Ino replied as she looked him over. To find to her shock that right there, and then he seemed to be completely fine. Not a scratch or a blemish on his face, nor a cut out of his clothing. He had not been hit once. I don't need to worry about me. I have fought those eyes for so long that they no longer affect me. That is why I'm fine, Naruto responded to Ino's questioning stare at his entire body. As he spoke, her eyes were brought to his face, which was smiling for whatever reason there was. It was his sincere smile, that foxy one that had Ino wishing she were closer to him than she already was. It was as if that smile had a pulling effect and Ino was considering letting in to the desire. You, on the other hand, have got to be seen by a medic soon. Your life is in dire jeopardy. If you are left much longer, the last of your chakra will disappear, Naruto responded so matter-of-factly that it grounded Ino. Wait, to be blunt. When Ino finally looked back to his face again, she could see the look of concern written upon his face and found it sweet, despite what he had so brashly said. Honestly, he had never learned any tact at all over the last few years, had he? What do you propose then? I can't move at all, and it would take too long for a medic to get out here. What's your suggestion? Ino asked sarcastically, not expecting an answer to her question. That was kind of the reason she asked it. Nonetheless, she received an answer. I will carry you back to Konoha, Ino-chan, Naruto said in a soft voice that Ino could just tell he had said with a smile. She and her entire team turned to Naruto at what he was suggesting. The fury in their eyes was plain for Naruto to see, and he jumped in fright. Only if you want. Only if you want. Naruto yelled to Ino as he tried his best to battle away the scary glares that he was receiving from all 4 of the women. Ladies, I do believe that we have made our point, Ino said to her squad as she turned to them with a smile on her face. Something that they feared they may never see again. Well, Naruto Baka, since your logic made so much sense, let's get out of here and back to Konoha. Remember your promise to get us back before the night was out? Ino asked as Naruto moved into position in order to lift her up from the ground. He had just placed his arms under her knees and shoulders when she asked him the question. At the question, he looked directly at her and nodded his head. Well, you have about another hour in order to do so, Ino said with a grin as she done so. What she noticed next, however, was the fact that Naruto's smirk found a way onto his face. So you doubt my capabilities of getting you to Konoha in the next hour, Ino? I can bet you 50 Ryo I'll have us there in the next 10 minutes, Naruto responded with a smirk that would rival Haiden's. Ino's smirk grew to accompany his. She was not going to be outdone by Naruto here, of course not. He was going to explain himself to her, and he was going to do so on the way to Konoha. Okay, then you have a deal, Ino said with a smile that exuded confidence. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, and suddenly there were 3 more identical Narutos over where the rest of Ino's team were, each of them offering a hand to a separate girl. All of them looked to Ino as if in question whether to trust the apparitions of the one who carried her. Ino understood their unwillingness to go with one who had shown so much brutality, but she knew Naruto, or she hoped she did anyway. It's okay girls, this is Naruto we are talking about here, he won't do anything to harm you, he is a kind soul at heart. Don't allow his display to scare you, Ino told her squad as they all nodded their heads and accepted the Naruto clone's hands, each being held in a position identical to Ino, in bridal position. Okay Naruto, show me how you plan to get me and my team back to Konoha in under 10 minutes, Ino said with a smirk. Naruto shook his head as he laughed slightly. Ino-chan, you don't remember what I used to get us out of where I fought Haruza, do you? Naruto asked as his chuckle escalated slightly, and Ino felt her body jiggle. It was not uncomfortable in the slightest though, since it was caused by Naruto and for some reason he exuded a calming agent on her. She couldn't care less just now. She felt her consciousness slipping away slowly, and could only answer with a weak no. As soon as Naruto could see that Ino was slowly losing consciousness, he looked up in furt. Guys, we're going to Konoha now. Say the jutsu, Naruto yelled to his doppelgangers before he vanished into a flash of golden light. The whole of Team Ino were given the slightest of chances to wonder what had just happened before they were in a tunnel that looked like the world was passing by them at the speed of a sound. The blackness receded somewhat, and Ino groaned as she could feel the light directly in front of her eyelids almost trying to burn through them. Damn it, how she hated lights when they done that, it hurt so damn much. That and the smell she was being overpowered with was one that she did not like much either. Anesthetic, the smell of it was not nice at all, nope. With that smell came a sudden realization of where she must be. She opened her eyes only to be blinded by the light that was directly above her bed. Honestly, why do they always put you right under a light? They trying to scare the shit out of you. She looked to the side in order to open her eyes without destroying them, and what she was met with surprised her. To her left were 3 more beds, and upon closer inspection she found that they were all occupied by her squad of girls. She suddenly sat upright in fright, wondering what had happened to her darling girls. Why were they all in a hospital when they were all last fighting with him? I told you I'd get you here before night fell, came a muffled noise from directly in front of her bed and slightly to the left. Ino looked to the direction the voice had come from and found the one that she seeked. There, sitting in one of the hospital chairs against the wall looking at all 4 of them, was the man that she had last seen before going into the blackness. She hadn't wanted to go there, but her body gave out on her, and she had no choice. Naruto was sitting in the chair with his arms folded and his head down. Ino tried to move some more but found that her body would not comply with what she wanted to do. Wincing in pain, Ino did not push any more than she had to. Being very far versed in the medical field, she knew she would need to rest. She had known this when she was fighting Haruza, but she wanted to save her squad and did not care about herself. That was until Naruto appeared and saved her, of course. The nurse said that you shouldn't move too much cause you gotta get your strength back first, Naruto said suddenly, and if Ino didn't know any better she would have thought that. She heard Naruto trying to give her advice on how to look after herself. More than that though, she heard the concern in his voice too. Looking up she found that Naruto was looking at her, but to her disappointment looking at him was like looking at a wall. Well, maybe porcelain was more apt, but she couldn't see his face and that was her main gripe. I know, remember I'm also a medic, Naruto. Thank you for the concern though, Ino answered him happily as she sat up correctly on her bed and looked directly at him. His mask was different this time. It was just a plain white mask. He must still have to make his canvas into a masterpiece yet. Naruto was about to respond until the door to their room opened up and a bunch of people flooded in. First of all was the Hokage herself. The years had clearly done nothing to her genjutsu face. Behind her was Inoichi Yamanaka, who had eyes only for his daughter who was on the faraway bed. After him was the head of the Hyuga clan. Hinata walked into the room with a grace only she could hold up. She wore the clothing of the clan head and moved directly over to the blonde Hyuga who was unconscious on the bed, instantly dropping next to her and softly rubbing her head as tears appeared. After Hinata was Kurenai, who walked into the room in a panic and obviously moved over to where her daughter lay silently, still breathing but looked to be at peace. Kurenai smiled at the bravery of her daughter and gently wiped away a bang on her face. Naruto watched in interest as the other girl within the group had no one coming in and acting as caring as the others he had seen. He decided that now was not the best time to ask questions, however, as the Hokage's gaze was suddenly upon him. I thank you for saving some of my shinobi, stranger, but I must ask why you have done so, and why you are still here. Tsunade asked the masked stranger. There was something about him that she felt was too familiar to feel comfortable with. Naruto got up off of his seat and showed his height to be much taller than the Hokage, and in one fluent movement was down on one knee in front of her with his head bowed. Forgive me, Hokage-sama. I am here to report a failed mission, Naruto said as he could hear the surprised gasps from most of the people who were conscious to hear him. Tsunade looked at the man kneeling before her. Who are you? She asked finally, as she could tell that despite who she thought it might be, there was no chance it was him. He was dead. The man removed the mask on his face and looked up. To Tsunade's shock, it was the carbon copy of who she thought it was. Only thing was that it was in fact his son. Naruto, Tsunade said in surprise, while everyone else in the room went silent. Chapter 3: A Hero Struggles. Naruto stood over the fallen body of the only man he would admit to ever feeling love for. The only man who had ever been as a brother to him, who had accepted him as an adversary and not as a beast just like the village always had. The one man who was responsible for so many pains in his life but also was part of the reason he was as strong as he was. It was never his desire to be Hokage, nor his desire to protect his precious people that had made him as strong as he was. They were strong contributory factors, but they were never the entire reason why Naruto strove to be stronger, trained to be better, tried to surpass himself. Sasuke was his reason to become stronger. Sasuke was his reason to become better. Sasuke was his reason to surpass himself at every turn he made. That one man was the reason Naruto was the man he was today. Naruto never cared for power to control, he never cared for power to dominate, and he only wanted power for one purpose and one purpose only. He wanted to save the one man that had treated him with an ounce of respect when so many others looked to him with such resentment. Tears began to form in Naruto's eyes as he looked to the prone form of Sasuke, no movements coming from the Uchiha. He fell to his knees and bowed his head down as he felt the tears stinging at his eyes only stronger now. His vision was blurred, but he could see what was directly in front of his face. The face of Sasuke Uchiha, white as a sheet of paper, lay beneath his own face. Eyes closed and looking almost at peace, Naruto stared at the face of his fallen brother for a long time. It was almost as if the world moved around him, not wishing to disturb him in his moment of mourning. The wind passed through the valley of the end and moved the hair that obscured some of Sasuke's face, giving Naruto the full view of the serene face that was now on Sasuke. His tears flowed down his face and rolled onto Sasuke's head, mixing in with the sweat and rain that was also on his forehead. With closed eyes, Naruto silently hated himself for what he had been forced into enacting. Behind closed eyes, Naruto was shown flashes of his battle with Sasuke, in every gruesome detail possible. When Sasuke ran him through with a black Chidori, when he forced a recent shuriken into Sasuke's gut, only for him to be saved by Naruto's unwillingness to kill him and Susanoo, when their battle was interrupted by Madara and they were forced to join together to fight him, and finally the moment when Sasuke was killed by Madara. It was at that point that Naruto felt his body shifting into overdrive. All of the wounds he had sustained began to fizz and bubble as they were slowly healed. His hands, which had been spread openly to support his weight over Sasuke, clenched tightly as his body began to malform, with hairs growing out of his body and his fingernails lengthening out to claws. He could feel his canines growing along his jawline and felt his body grow, but then he felt nothing. With the start, Naruto sat up suddenly, sweating heavily and panting in fear. His breathing was not calming down, and as such in the dark he held his hand over his chest and tried to slow down his breathing. When eventually his breathing subsided and he was able to calmly look at his surroundings, he found himself in a place he detested more than many things. In all these years he had yet to get used to this place. The hospital. "You talk really loud in your sleep, do you know that?" came a soft voice from his left, to which he turned to and found a pair of azure eyes staring at him softly, and a small smile on the face of the one who spoke to him. Naruto thought for a moment, and figured out where he was. "My apologies, Yamanaka-san. I have not slept in company for a long time, so I don't know," Naruto answered back apologetically as he looked down on his lap. It was the truth though, he had not slept in the same room as anyone in a fair number of years now. He had always been on the move and not very often had he ever taken the time to share his abode with anyone, except in extenuating circumstances. Ino was more wondering about the change in formalities with the man in less than 24 hours, although she did have to admit that even though he put on a show of toughness, he was far from it when he had finally gotten all of them back to Konoha. "Why am I in here, Yamanaka-san?" Naruto asked suddenly as he looked about himself with confusion evident in his voice. Ino didn't know how it was possible for him to be so blissfully unaware of the fact that he was completely covered in bandages. Inside she giggled at the antics of the man in the bed next to her own. No matter how old he got, it appeared as though he was forever going to be a child within the shell of a man. "First of all, please call me Ino. All this Yamanaka-san stuff makes me feel old. And it makes me feel as if you don't think we are friends at all," Ino said with a somewhat pout that had Naruto seen he did not comment on it. He however nodded his head in understanding. "Second of all, you are in that bed because not long after Hokage-sama entered the room and you admitted to failing some mission, you fell backwards unconscious," Ino began explaining as she rested into her pillow that had been maneuvered to allow her to sleep. "It was only once you fell unconscious that the Hokage was able to see everything that happened to you. There were numerous scars on your body and poisons running through your veins that she almost had a heart attack at the condition you were in. She said by all rights you should be dead," Ino finished off as she looked over to the face of Naruto. As the darkness of the room became more focused in Ino's mind, she could see his face perfectly now. It looked saddened, and if Ino was not correct then she could have sworn that she saw a look of disappointment cross over Naruto's features. Was he unhappy that he was alive? "Naruto? What's wrong?" Ino asked softly as Naruto lifted his head up to look at her. She saw his eyes and saw his flash of his true self before the visage covered it up. His grin grew in proportions and he turned to her with that same smile he had always given her. It made her feel that everything was alright with the world. Yet she saw that momentary sadness and was stunned to realize that the mask she was looking at was one she had seen her entire life. "What? Nothing is wrong, why would there be?" Naruto asked as he smiled to her with his usual disarming smile that made it seem as if things could not go any more smoother. Ino knew for a fact that he was lying to her straight-faced, and though she did not like it one bit, who was she to argue? She had not seen him in a long time, and sometimes there are skeletons we just wish never to be found. It's just that after I told you about all of your injuries you seemed almost sad. I just wanted to make sure you were alright, Ino answered with a genuine smile towards him. If he was trying to smile to make the situation more bearable, then it was only fair that she smile back to him in all honesty. Oh, I'm fine thanks, Ino-chan. I guess it came as a bit of a shock that there was so much happening with my body and I never realized it. I didn't think I was quite so close to death, Naruto admitted as he kept his smile in place while in his mind his thoughts were thinking along a completely different track. I was so close to death? I guess that was why my movements were getting sluggish, Naruto thought to himself as he watched Ino's mouth move and noticed he had tuned her out. With a slight bit of embarrassment he tuned her back in. It sounded like some strong stuff that was in your blood. Just what have you been up to, Naruto? Ino finished with a questioning look that Naruto smiled and rubbed the back of his head, for the first time realizing that he had bandages all around his head. Shaking off his feeling of stupidity for that moment, Naruto answered Ino. You know, this and that, Naruto responded with a slight laugh that again got Ino slightly frustrated in the manner that he avoided her question. She could not get mad at him because he did technically answer her question, and she did not want to be too overbearing. After so long apart she did not know what the limits between them were, not the romantic kind, just the limits between friends. What she could get away with around him basically. I see, despite it avoiding the question entirely, I will let you away with it. After so long away I doubt telling everyone everything is high on your agenda list, Ino admitted more to herself than to Naruto but lifted her head up when she heard Naruto chuckle lightly. For the first time in their conversation Ino saw what she knew was a true smile on his face. It was small but it was genuine. I guess that's true. I've not been in the village in a long time, Naruto began before finishing abruptly and looked to his lap. Ino wondered what could possibly have happened. She did not however wish to disturb him as it appeared something was deeply troubling him, and she honestly did not know if she should or shouldn't say anything. I've not been here ever since the end of the 4th Shinobi War, Naruto finished with a smile on his face. Wow, I've almost definitely missed out on a lot of things happening, haven't I? Naruto asked, slightly embarrassed by his cluelessness in the expanse of time. Yes, you really have missed out on a lot, Ino said as she yawned heavily. Naruto had really woke up with a fright at such a bad time, honestly. She was enjoying a very good dream when he woke her up. He may have been part of that dream, but that wasn't the point. I guess I gotta catch up now then, huh? So long as the council don't try anything with me after this failure, Naruto finished with the slightest hints of doubt conquering his voice at the end. Ino heard it loud and clear, the change in his voice from confident to unsure. It was like a sting to her heart to think of him getting in trouble for failing whatever mission it was he was on. Naruto lay down and turned his back to her, facing towards the window, and before long she heard the rhythmic breathing of Naruto as he slept. Ino was thinking to herself of the man that lay in the bed next to her. She had not told him the worst of his condition because she worried about his response to such information. The true extent of his injuries included multiple fractured bones, many scars, some of which were infected, and the many poisons within his bloodstream. None of them showed up until he was unconscious, when they all appeared as if they had been suppressed as he was awake. His scars were surprisingly easy to heal, and the same for his fractured bones. It was as if he was stopping his very own body from healing naturally, which even Tsunade admitted to not understanding. The poisons within his bloodstream, just as Tsunade said, should have killed him, but in some lucky twist of fate the sheer amount of poisons, and the variety of them, meant that it was almost like they met and nullified each other, making them nothing more than harmless traces within his blood. Naruto essentially had the most potent poison within his blood being the poison now. In all, Naruto had definitely changed, but his genetic makeup and his psyche were two completely different things. This was normal for everyone, but on Naruto it was a shoo-in. He was definitely different in his head than he was genetically shown to be. His body may be poisoned, but surely his mind couldn't be damaged. Could it? After what Ino had not long ago just witnessed, she was honestly not too sure. Later that day, Ino was wide awake and had been for a long time now. It was midday, and because of her usual shinobi duties she was hardwired to get up much earlier than midday. Since she was stuck in the hospital for the next 2 days, though it looked like she was going to have to get used to sitting around doing nothing, she would have preferred it if her team were at least able to wake up. But she had to admit that after what they had been through, and what they had been so close to being subject to, she couldn't blame them. They were exhausted, plain and simple. That just meant that Ino was forced to sit in this boring hospital room all by herself and try to think of any tangible way that she could fight off the boredom. The ideas were not coming thick and fast. Then, as her eyes had done so many times ever since she had woken up, her eyes found their path being directed towards the blonde shinobi to her right-hand side. It was miraculous the condition he was in. With the added light of the midday sun, Ino was able to see just what condition Naruto was in. His entire body was covered in bandages, even right across his head. He looked much like he did after his first attempt at retrieving Sasuke. There were also many different tubes running to and from him, carrying varying fluids to try and help him. The man himself, though, seemed completely undisturbed. Ever since he had fallen asleep the night before, he had been completely silent. Ino would have thought him dead if she had not seen his chest rising and falling with his every breath. He was an amazing man. That he could withstand the sheer amount of injuries he had entered with astounded her, and even gave Tsunade the fright of her life. Ino was interrupted from her thoughts when the door to her room was opened. She turned to the ones who had entered to find a nice sight before her. Shika! Choji! Ino called out happily as the two aforementioned men smiled in her direction before walking over to her bed. Both men had changed since the time of the Fourth Shinobi War. Shikamaru stood much taller now at about 6 feet, and his physical frame had stretched somewhat. He was still lazy as ever, but his body was primed for anything. Choji stood about the same height as his best friend, but where Shikamaru had bulked up slightly, Choji had become slightly more round. Even at that, he was not overly large by any means. Both were wearing almost identical attire from their time in the allied shinobi forces, the only difference being that they had the Konoha headband. Hey Ino, Choji said with a happy smile on his face at seeing his old teammate. It had definitely been a long time since they'd seen each other. Ever since becoming jonin, they all had their own teams to look after and help, and honestly time was tight at times. Why are you in here? I always thought that you were the one who said you could look after yourself, Choji said with a bit of a grin on his face towards Ino, who pouted in answer. You're mean to me, Choji. Ino whined quietly while looking down to her lap, with her face still in a pouting position. Choji laughed slightly as Shikamaru looked around the room at the 3 girls that were in the beds next to Ino. He turned back to Ino as his gaze fell upon the sleeping form of Kyoki. Slight concern was written on his face as he looked to Ino. Ino, is Kyoki alright? Shikamaru asked, and Ino could instantly tell that Shikamaru was concerned for the well-being of the young girl. He had promised that he would look after his sensei's child and become their sensei to make them a cool adult. While he had not become her sensei, he still looked after her to the best of his abilities, almost becoming the father she had lost. Yes, she's fine, Shika. Just tired through chakra exhaustion, Ino answered back with a soft smile which did serve to calm Shikamaru down slightly. Choji watched as his best friend seemed to become less tense after Ino's assurance that Kyoki was fine. Speaking of which, how did you all get back if you were all exhausted from chakra exhaustion? Choji asked as he looked to Ino, and then surveyed all of the girls in the room who were all sleeping soundly at that moment and time. I would love to be able to say that it was me who was able to force myself onwards home while carrying all of them, but it wasn't me, Ino answered back, half ashamed and half embarrassed. Shikamaru and Choji looked to Ino in confusion. It wasn't like Ino to blush like this, and after the events leading up to now, they couldn't understand why she was blushing. Then who was it that helped you? I mean, after the 4th Shinobi War it could be a wide variety of shinobi. I can't remember how many of the other countries' shinobi you and Sakura healed, Choji said as Shikamaru nodded his head in agreement. Indeed, Ino and Sakura, after the fighting had ceased and Madara was gone, in a rather brutal way that is, there were still the sick and the wounded to tend to. Both of them, with the help of Tsunade, Shizun and Hinata to name but a few, healed any and every shinobi that came to them, gaining reputations as fair shinobi the world over. It wasn't any shinobi from another village. We were too far away from any of the other villages to get any help from them. It was one of Konoha's shinobi that helped us, Ino answered as again Shikamaru and Choji looked to her both confused and surprised. They hadn't heard of any other Konoha shinobi being with Ino and her squad. All they knew was that Ino and her squad were in hospital with chakra exhaustion. Who was it? Shikamaru asked this time, prepared to go and thank whichever shinobi it was that protected his old teammate and the girl who was more or less a daughter to him, despite many assurances that he was just a guardian. Ino smiled at her old teammate's enthusiasm. Shikamaru really was an energetic individual if something really meant something to him. Ino jerked her head towards the bed that currently housed the sleeping form of Naruto. He did, Ino said as she too looked over to where Naruto lay. Shikamaru and Choji's jaws almost literally hit the floor. They could see that whoever this guy was, he had definitely been through one hell of a lot. His entire body was covered in bandages, and that was before they got to the amount of tubes running to and from his body. Who is that? Shikamaru asked, almost sounding shocked. And why wouldn't he? The state of the man occupying that bed looked horrible. It reminded him of a friend's condition years ago after a failed retrieval mission. Choji was staring at the man too. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. It was as if this man was literally walking the tightrope of life. It was as Choji stared at the face of the man that he caught a glimpse of who he might be. For the slightest seconds he saw the eyes hidden behind the shadow of the bandages opening, and could see the cerulean color of them as they momentarily opened, and then just as quickly closed again. And then no way! Choji almost yelled as he stared into the shadowed face of the man in the bed next to Ino. She was currently staring at Naruto's body, which had resumed its rhythmic breathing. Shikamaru was however worried about the sudden reaction of his best friend, and moved beside him to find out the problem. What's wrong, Choji? He asked quickly as he was now standing next to his best friend who was currently still staring at the man in the bed. Ino? That isn't who I think it is it? Choji asked Ino as he looked to her, finding that she too was looking at the man in the other bed with warmth in her eyes and maybe a hint of concern. Yes, it's Naruto, Ino answered shortly as her gaze never once wavered from him at all. Choji and Shikamaru noticed this and once again looked to the form of Naruto. The last time they had been around Naruto it had not been on the most pleasant of terms. As if hearing the name was a beacon, the form of Naruto began to shift and move in the current position on the bed. After a few moments he regained his bearings and looked to his left only to see Ino staring at him, but also he saw Choji and Shikamaru staring at him in almost fear? Right enough, the last time they had talked, Naruto had been somewhat worked up. He sat up on his bed and looked over to the trio who were currently staring at him. Why are you staring at me like that? Naruto asked slowly as he looked to each of three individually. Ino was first surprised due to his cold voice and due to the fact that her two teammates had tensed up ever since Naruto had awoken. Naruto's gaze became a cold glare as he looked at all of them. Ino could not understand why the atmosphere had become so dark and scary so suddenly. Naruto had seemed alright during the night, but now it was like he had changed overnight. When Naruto never received a reply from the two men, he lifted himself from his bed, pulling out tubes from all over his body. He did not wince once as he moved and caused a tube of liquid to forcibly exit his body. He pulled on his clothes that lay on the chair next to his bed and turned back around to the three who looked at him in horror. Through the black undershirt he wore they could see multiple lines of blood seeping out of his body and onto the bandages. After moving around, it had no doubt opened up the scars. Naruto! You shouldn't be moving around! Ino screamed as Naruto basically ignored her and reached over to where his white chest armor and shoulder plates were. He managed to get the armor on, but when he reached for his cloak he found that the place it should have been was bare of anything except air. Naruto grunted in annoyance, and when he looked over he could see his cloak was in the hands of Shikamaru as he looked at Naruto now without fear, but with concern. The blood was beginning to drip down his arm in torrents. For God's sake, Naruto, please listen to me, if you don't stop you might die. Ino pleaded as Naruto slowly made his way over to where Shikamaru and Choji were standing. Both got into a subtle defensive stance. Naruto did not hear or did not listen to her as he moved over to where all three were. Naruto's breathing became heavier and laborious as he moved forward. He made to take his cloak from Shikamaru, but two things happened. First of all was that as Naruto made to take his cloak he feebly shot his hand forward to grab it only to touch nothing. After that, through and due to the momentum he had gathered, Naruto ended up in a heap on the floor. His breathing was getting worse and his body began to shake. It was then that Ino realized to her shock that Naruto was going into shock. Shika! Choji! Get a medic Nin in here now, Naruto is in trouble. Ino screamed to her two teammates who didn't need to be told twice. Ino never yelled at them like that in such fear. It was clear that Naruto saving her had definitely brought her around to worrying about him a great deal. Shikamaru and Choji ran out of the room and split directions, hoping that one of them would find a medic. Nin. Ino could not just sit in her bed while a man who had saved her life was slowly losing his own. She lifted herself out of her bed, lucky that she did not have anything in her veins or body at all for that matter, and stood up above Naruto. She leaned down and laced her arms around Naruto's shoulders and tried to lift him off the ground. Needless to say, it failed miserably. Not wanting to leave Naruto at all, Ino sat down on the cold floor, and with Naruto's shoulders already raised, she rested his entire body against her own. In the end his head lay on her lap. His own weight had forced him to slide down her body. She tried to remain calm despite his head being in a rather uncomfortable place. She could not dwell on that right now though, because she had to keep Naruto awake and let him know that she was there. Naruto, it's alright, you're alright, someone will be here to help you soon, Ino cooed to the man who was shaking on her lap. This situation scared Ino out of her wits. She had seen this before, of course, and she had seen it on Shinobi before too. It was just a man who currently was in this state scared her. Naruto had never been one to get so ill in the past. He had sustained many injuries in his life and had managed to soldier on through them. But right now he seemed so vulnerable, and she was scared now for the man's life. Naruto seemed to calm down after a few moments. His body stopped shaking. Ino panicked when she thought that Naruto might actually have finally lost his fight. But when she felt his rhythmic breathing return, she felt relief. Her hands that had been absently stroking his cheeks in reassurance of his safety were feeling slightly sticky, and as Ino lifted her hand she saw that there was blood coating her hands and fingers. It was at that moment when Ino inspected her hand that the door to their room was suddenly blown off its hinges and sent into the wall opposite it. Ino looked up when she saw and heard high heels rushing over to their current position. Suddenly standing over them was a very worried-looking Tsunade. She looked to the form of Naruto laying on the form of Ino, and ran her eyes all over Naruto's body. What happened? Tsunade barked, not in the mood to be nice right now. Her favorite knucklehead ninja was on the floor in what seemed like mortal peril. And if the way that Choji had run into her was any indication, this was definitely serious. Ino looked up to the eyes of the older woman, and could see the raw worry on her face. I don't know, Hokage-sama. He just woke up and started to get dressed, trying to leave. Then Shikamaru took his cloak so he couldn't finish. When he went to take it from Shikamaru he collapsed here, Ino answered quickly and precisely to Tsunade. She could see the look in the Hokage's eyes. It was a get to the point, or this won't be pretty kind of look. What is his condition? Tsunade barked as she still stood over the pair. She was not going to touch the boy until she knew exactly what was going on, lest she cause even more problems for the man. All I know is that he is bleeding heavily and that he had gone into shock not too long ago, Ino answered again just as quickly as she had before. Tsunade nodded her head in understanding before she quickly lifted Naruto off the ground and put him back onto his bed. Tsunade stripped him of all the clothes he had tried to put on, and removed the now soaked bandages, revealing the harrowing sight of Naruto's chest. It was covered in scars of all sizes and colors almost. There was also much blood beginning to pour from the scars. Tsunade had to fight back her hemophobia at the sight of all the blood, and placed her hands over the areas that his body seemed the worst affected. namely 2 large scars crossing over his entire chest and stomach, and a large scar that seemed suspiciously like one Tsunade had seen before. She pumped chakra to her hands and they suddenly glowed with a green aura over the scars. Ino was standing by Naruto's bedside when she felt a presence coming up behind her, and saw Choji out of breath running towards them. "Sorry I'm late, Ino. I got Hokage-sama and she ran off faster than I expected and she got away from me," Choji explained while Ino absent-mindedly nodded her head to her teammate, who then focused his own attention on the form of Naruto. Seeing the scars that were covered by the bandages, Choji almost felt sick. To see a body in that condition was just too harrowing. What was slightly worrying for him too was the fact that despite her greatest level of skill in the field, Tsunade was sweating now, and the wounds on Naruto were not subsiding in the slightest. Both he and Ino could see the look of concentration on Tsunade's face disappear and a look of desperation take over. "No! Don't do this to me! Naruto! Don't die on me!" Tsunade screamed at the boy who was slowly dying under her own healing skills. It was the worst kind of fate to be the one to watch as someone dies due to your inability to save them. Ino brought her hand up to her mouth as she heard the way Tsunade's voice changed. It was sheer desperation now. Choji was also lost in confusion and fear. For Tsunade to act in such a way was not often heard of, and to witness it was worrying. "Naruto," Ino said softly as she reached out towards the man who had saved hers and her team's life. She felt a hand resting on her shoulder, and knew instinctively that it was Choji's. Though it may have calmed her down marginally, it did not diffuse her fear, and she looked on through almost hazy vision as Naruto slowly lost his fight with the death god. "Tsunade-sama." Tsunade Shiso came 2 different voices that were like the best sound that Ino or Tsunade had ever heard. There in the doorway were 3 figures. There were 2 women and a man. One of the women had on the long kimono that she would often be found wearing and with longish black hair. The first woman, Shizen, entered the room and moved over to Tsunade's side. The second woman was Sakura. She had on form-fitting shorts that were black along with black sandals. She had on special medical issue jonin vest that was cream in color with a red cross on the left breast. Her hair was also longer now, reaching down to her shoulders and a bit more. She ran into the room and stood next to Ino and Choji, opposite Tsunade and Shizen. Finally the male of the group came into the room, much quicker than he was known to move in the past. Kakashi entered the room with swiftness. He had changed drastically. He was once again garbed in the uniform of the ANBU, and his mask was laying at his side. Another notable thing about him was that his hair had completely changed. It had turned pure white, just like his father's before him. "Tsunade-sama, what happened to him?" Shizen almost yelled to her sensei, who barely turned to her before barking an order. "That doesn't matter, Shizen. We have to save him or else he is dead." Tsunade yelled and caused many of those around her to flinch at the way she had spoken and what she had said. Ino felt herself losing hope. Sakura and Shizen, however, dived into applying their healing chakra. They definitely had questions surrounding why Naruto was there, and why he was in such a condition, but right now those questions could not be addressed. Kakashi slipped his eye patch from his Sharingan eye and looked to Naruto's body when he noticed that there were no visible changes despite the amount of healing he was being subject to. Tsunade was almost completely exhausted already, and Sakura and Shizen were slowly but surely depleting their own chakra. When he found out the cause, he closed his eyes and let out a heavy sigh. "Hokage-sama, it's useless. His own chakra is fighting back all of your healing chakra. His body is rejecting your healing," Kakashi said to the 3 women, who all looked to him with shocked faces. Ino and Choji looked to him too. Choji was shocked and Ino looked destroyed. They all looked to Naruto again to see his body sweating heavily. Kakashi hated to say it, but he knew someone had to. "I think it looks like it's up to him if he wakes up or not," Kakashi said as softly as he could, trying his hardest to ignore the crushed looks of those around him. Chapter 4: A Hero Slumbers. The last few days had been the most nerve-wracking of her entire life, and she was really not enjoying it at all. Her body was back to premium condition again, and she was fit enough to go back on active duty, yet she did not think it right to go just yet. There was someone she had to thank properly first, and right now he was in his bed, sleeping. At least it was better than the alternative that most of those who were there a few days ago had thought. It was scary to watch such a scene play out. She had never watched as someone as strong as Naruto was slowly decaying away right before her very eyes. Not only that, but to watch as 3 of the most proficient medical shinobi tried and failed to save the man from what appeared to be his death was also scary. It was like whatever Naruto was going through, there was no possible way to give him any help. He had to help himself, as Kakashi had basically told them. She didn't like the thought that Naruto was fighting against the help that he was being given, but after seeing his condition she wondered to herself honestly. Naruto, Ino barely whispered to the prone form that lay on the hospital bed. He was once again covered in bandages and pierced by many tubes, but this time he was forcibly restrained. "What has happened to you? What could have possibly happened to you in the last 5 years?" Ino asked the man before her rhetorically. He did not stir, he did not move, his body simply continued to function, albeit almost grudgingly. "He has been through a lot," came a voice that seemed almost as pained as her own, and when Ino turned around slightly she came face to face with the Hokage. She looked just as worried as Ino felt, which did not help Ino conquer her own worries. "What do you mean, Tsunade-sama?" Ino asked, ignoring the fact that it was in fact the Hokage who was going to do Naruto's routine checkup today. Although it had been a mixture between Sakura and Shizen up until now, the three of them obviously wanted to keep his chances high. Do you remember when Naruto came in here and reported a failed mission? Tsunade asked, to which Ino nodded her head. Of course she did. That was when everyone realized it was Naruto, and then he had keeled over and all his injuries were revealed. Just thinking about it was making Ino feel queasy. His failed mission was the retrieval of Sasuke Uchiha. Tsunade finalized, at which Ino could only stare at her while her mouth tried to catch flies. So that means Ino began but was unable to finish as she looked to Naruto with pity in her eyes. How could he go on with such a thing on his conscience? Yes, Naruto witnessed the death of Sasuke. Tsunade finished as Ino's head jerked back up and looked into the amber eyes of her Hokage. The way she had worded that made it sound different from what Ino had been thinking. Could it possibly be? When you say witnessed, it sounds like you are hinting that Naruto wasn't responsible, Ino said, while at the same time trying to think of any scenario where Naruto would have to watch Sasuke die, besides him having to do it himself. He wasn't, well, not entirely. It was not his own fault. Tsunade began as Ino looked up again, hopeful towards her Hokage. Which honestly had Tsunade surprised. She didn't know that the Yamanaka had such care towards Naruto. She would have thought the women to be this close to him to be between Hinata and Sakura. Not that they were not worried, by no means was that the case. Hinata broke down into tears when she saw the state of Naruto, and when Sakura operated on him she too had to hold back tears when told her help was not reaching him. During his fight with Sasuke, Naruto and Sasuke fought together against Madara. Unfortunately, Sasuke took the hit from one of Madara's attacks that ended up killing him. Tsunade began as she could already feel the tears stinging at her eyes at the memory of that time. It truly was horrible. Naruto watched this, and through his grief and anger he held himself in check long enough to defeat Madara. Tsunade continued on as she got to the part that began the real pain in the story. Ino stared at the Hokage in disbelief. The Hokage, the strongest shinobi in the village, whose very name sends chills into the spines of their enemies, was at that very moment and time crying. It was not just a weak cry with few tears, this was full-blown pain. This was unbridled hurt, the likes of which Ino had never seen on her Hoki's face. Tsunade-sama, what's wrong? Ino asked as she tried desperately to get the attention of Tsunade, who was wobbling now. Ino had to grab her and sit her down in a chair that was right next to Naruto's bed. After being seated she seemed to calm down slightly as she leaned her head on her hand that in turn leaned on the armrest of the chair. Her gaze fell upon Naruto again and Ino felt it the right time to reiterate her question. What's wrong, Hokage-sama? Ino asked tentatively, trying to make sure that Tsunade would not blow up again. It really was scary the way she was acting lately. Up until then she had been the usual Tsunade, but the instant Naruto was back she changed. Ino, that day, the day he watched Sasuke die, that was the day that Naruto literally lost his mind. Tsunade answered, leaving Ino to just stare at her. There was no way, was there? How could Naruto have lost his mind? He was acting just like he always had when he had saved her and her team. But Tsunade-sama, Naruto was fine when he saved my squad and he acted just like he always had. Ino answered back, trying her hardest to deny the thought of Naruto actually breaking under any kind of pressure. He seemed too strong-willed to let something like that get to him. Ino, you never knew Naruto. No one ever knew Naruto. Not even me, Kakashi, Sakura, not even Jiraiya knew Naruto. The only one who ever understood Naruto was Sasuke, as much as I hate to admit it. That brat done nothing but hurt Naruto. But at the same time he was all that kept Naruto from exploding. With his death Naruto lost his will to fight back his demons, Tsunade said as pain filled her voice with her every word. Ino was still only able to stare at her dumbly. She never knew Naruto. But of course she did. He was the academy dead last that proved he could ascend further than any of the other rookies could. Tsunade-sama, I did know Naruto. He was the man who could not be put down, who believed in himself when no one else would. He was able to overtake every single one of our year group in leaps and bounds. I knew Naruto. Ino affirmed more to herself than to Tsunade. It was then that Ino saw the glint of anger that moved across Tsunade's eyes and suddenly feared for her very life. You have no idea what you are talking about. You think you knew Naruto? Very well, tell me why he was treated like scum since the day of his birth. Tell me why he wore a mask of happiness. Tell me why he never came to anyone for comfort. Tsunade yelled out while she sat in her seat. Even in such a position she was an imposing figure. Ino flinched at the way in which Tsunade was acting. It seemed almost protective while at the same time fierce. It was a conundrum in itself, but that was what it seemed like. When Ino did not answer Tsunade, she continued on herself. Naruto never came to anyone for anything, yet he was always there for those who needed his help. He was even there to save you and your team when you faced off against an S-ranked criminal. He used his new jutsu that harmed him just as much as it did his enemy. But did he complain once? Nope, he just continued onwards. Tsunade began as she looked back at Naruto with warmth in her eyes. Ino swore it looked like a mother watching over her child. Then when Jiraiya died, again he sought no one out for comfort because he did not know who to go to. Despite knowing that myself, Iruka or even Kakashi would listen to him. He never sought any of us out. It was Iruka who went looking for him. Tsunade continued as she again felt the pain of the events in her heart. She honestly hated the life that Naruto had been forced to live. It was then that the only time she had ever seen Naruto weak popped into her head. The only time he has ever sought out anyone was after the Fourth Shinobi War ended, after the entire Zetsu army was decimated by a lone figure. I knew that it was Naruto. It was then that he fell into my tent. Tsunade began as she began feeling the tears stinging at her eyes again. This was a horrible memory she wished she never saw. It was Naruto at his weakest, and it was when Tsunade's heart felt closest to breaking. Flashback. Tsunade was currently in her tent. The night had come in and had ended the final day of the Fourth Shinobi War. It had only lasted a total of 3 days, but it had been long and tiring, and too many people had lost their lives. The war had ended due to some lone figure running through the mass of Zetsus and utterly destroying them in every sense of the word. She smiled since she had a good idea as to who it was that accomplished such a feat. Only one shinobi did she know that could take on such odds with a good chance of winning. Returning her thoughts from the blonde shinobi that was no doubt resting in his own tent by now, she returned to the bane of her very existence, the paperwork. After a few moments she was ready to pack it all in, but was stopped from doing so when she realized that if peace was to be kept as it was, then this paperwork needed to be done. It was only a few moments later that she heard voices outside her tent that seemed frenzied and worried at the same time, if that even made any sense. Tsunade tried to tune it out, but as it got louder and louder her curiosity got the better of her. Getting out of her chair, she moved over to the flap of her tent and moved it aside and stepped out into the open campground. Looking for the source of the commotion, she could see a large variety of people closing in on her, but what scared her was the one in the center of all of them, walking towards her, looking deader than she had ever seen anyone walking before. Was Naruto. His body was slowly trudging towards her as his head bobbed pathetically with his every movement. He was wearing the same clothing his father had done before him. Even if he did keep the orange and black jumpsuit, everything he wore was tattered and scorched though. Add to that the numerous patches of blood that were seeping through his clothes, he looked like hell incarnate. It was then that she noticed his intended target. As he moved close enough to touch her, he moved around her and into her tent, leaving Tsunade to stare at his back as he moved inside. Everyone else stood outside the tent looking at Tsunade questioningly. She could only look back at them just as confused before her worry took over, and she moved inside of her tent to see Naruto sitting on her bed and staring off into the distance, without any obvious things occupying his vision. Tsunade moved over to him carefully. This could always be a trick, and she knew for a fact that if this was indeed Naruto, then something had gone horribly wrong. Naruto? Tsunade asked as she tried to lean down slightly and look into his eyes. All she wanted to do was to see his oceanic blue eyes that seemed to wash away all worries. When he did not respond, she moved around until she was next to him, and sat down on the bed next to him. Naruto? She reiterated as she encircled her arm around his waist, trying to show him that she was at least here and that he was not alone in whatever was bothering him. Then the one things that Tsunade would have never thought Naruto capable of happened. His arms flew into the air and grabbed Tsunade around her waist, but it was not forceful. It was more desperate, and after a few seconds of nothing, Tsunade heard sobs and finally the movements as Naruto's body moved with the sobs, his tears coming thick and fast down his cheeks and onto her shoulder. At a loss for what to say, Tsunade done the only thing that seemed appropriate at the time. With Naruto's arms around her waist and holding her so desperately, but not tightly, she moved her arms and brought them around Naruto's neck and hugged into him. She stroked the back of his head soothingly as he continued to cry his soul out. No words were spoken, none were required. To speak would destroy the delicate balance of things within their current predicament. Tsunade was not one to try anything that did not require being done in these situations. Add to the fact that the one man she believed would do as he had always done and soldier on, she realized just how selfish that sounded. It only reinforced her newfound desire to be there for the boy, to comfort him, to love him as he had never been given the opportunity in the past. With these thoughts reaffirmed within her mind, Tsunade hugged tighter into the man that was almost like both the son and grandson she had never had, just like he had been for Jiraiya, as she thought. It was only then that she noticed the irony of the situation. The way she was thinking, through Naruto, she and Jiraiya would have been perfect candidates of parents to the young man. Despite these thoughts bringing back memories long since hidden and emotions long since exerted, Tsunade couldn't bear to break down in front of the already broken Naruto. He had never asked for anything before, and what he was asking her without even speaking was plain to see. He did not want to be alone throughout whatever it was that had happened, and since he had never asked her anything of this caliber before, she was well prepared to take all the time he needed out of her life to comfort him. His body was heavy, and it was only now that she was forced to realize the extent of his injuries. He had multiple gashes all across his body, many of them deep at that too. It was not only the injuries that had her thinking ever so rapidly about the condition of the man who was hugging her so desperately. It was his physical conditioning too. His body was vastly muscular compared to what he had used to be. While this may seem like a bonus for the young man, and admittedly it was, the speed with which he was forced to gain such strength, and the amount of physical stress his body had been subject to put him at a dangerous level. Even with the powers of the Kyuubi's healing chakra that helped him regenerate at high speeds, would have to be struggling after that. It was ever so sudden that Tsunade noticed that no longer was her shoulder being reapplied with any warmth or moisture. His tears had stopped, but his head had not moved from its position on her shoulder. Tsunade was content to leave him like that for however long he could possibly need before she heard the steady breathing of Naruto coming from her shoulder, and realized that he was actually asleep. Tsunade just looked at him. She could not drag her eyes away from him. He had actually cried himself to sleep, as sad as it made her. She found solace in the fact that Naruto was spared the demons of the waking world for a while. Tsunade softly moved him so that he was lying on the bed. To look at his almost peaceful face allowed Tsunade to forget about the fact that it was clear Naruto was going through some mental stress. When she did remember about this though, she felt a sense of sorrow and pity wash over her. Naruto was going through hell, and from what she could guess, the only one even capable of keeping him sane was dead. Flashback ends. Ino was left speechless. She had never thought about it like that before. Not once had she ever thought about the mental well-being of the lovable blonde. She had always seen him as mentally strong as he had always made himself out to be. He seemed to show that when he said to the entire Rookie 11 that he would take care of Sasuke himself. He had exuded so much confidence and determination at the time that Ino honestly thought that he could both do it and get through it. She had never thought about how it may have affected Naruto, and it was quite clear that it had in fact affected him terribly. Tsunade said that Naruto lost his mind when Sasuke died, lost his very mind. To Ino that was something that scared her without any explanation. To her losing one's mind was like forgetting everything of worth in life and forever going through the rest of life without any clear direction anymore. Truly an existence she did not want Naruto to have. Ino was brought out of her trance when she felt the presence of figures in the room with her and Tsunade. Looking over to her Hokage, she could see that the eyes which had previously been tear-filled looked vicious and ready to strike. Thought Ino had seen Tsunade angry before. She had never seen such primal and predatory emotions pass over her face in the past, and it showed Ino a side of her Hokage that she was definitely sure was the maternal side of her. "What do you want?" Tsunade asked fiercely towards whomever it was that had just entered the room. Ino honestly felt sorry for whoever it was. Tsunade did not sound like someone to mess with just now. "We came to pay our respects to the man that saved our daughters," came the slightly strong voice. It was one Ino knew very well, and upon spinning around wildly she came face to face with the owner of that voice, her father. It was not only him though. Accompanying him were the figures of Hinata and Kurenai, and surprisingly enough Anko was there too. "Why is Anko-san here? You aren't a mother, are you?" Ino asked, confused despite the current tense atmosphere that was surrounding the group of people, although it was mainly due to the glares that were being sent to everyone within the room from An Hokage. Needless to say, many of them were highly considering running, but neglected to give in to their urges. "No, I'm here to thank the man that saved my cute little goddaughter," Anko answered back with one of her uncharacteristic true smiles that held no malice nor ill content. She didn't have to say much more really. With that statement and the smile, everyone was more captivated to believe her in this one time. "That, and I wanted to see what kind of hunk that kid turned into by now," Anko finished with her characteristic grin that exuded confidence. Ino almost face faulted and hit the ground, as did many of the other adults within the room. The trademark redness of Hinata began to cover over her face slowly as she thought about what Anko had just said. Kurenai giggled at the antics of her friend, and Inoichi was left speechless for lack of a better phrase. The noise that was a gracious one to all of their ears was however the slight chuckle of their Hokage was sitting with a hand over her mouth, containing her laughter. "You know how to defuse a situation, Anko. I was ready to fight just about everyone for a second there," Tsunade said as she stood on her 2 feet again, seemingly having her strength back. "I shall just finish my checkup on Naruto then leave you all be," Tsunade said as she done as she had said and went to work on Naruto's checkup. Once she was done, she looked up with a smile on her face that revealed to them all a glimmer of hope that Naruto was actually going to be alright. "Now Ino, I will give you leave from missions until Naruto gets better. If I can ask you to make sure that you watch his condition for me, please?" Tsunade almost implored the young woman that she had just walked up to. Tsunade stood at the exact same height as Ino and looked directly into Ino's eyes, making Ino stare into those amber orbs that seemed to be begging her to look after the man. Eventually she could not bear to see those eyes disappointed and gave in. "Very well, Tsunade-sama," Ino conceded, and could see the relieved smile that crossed Tsunade's face as she spoke those words. "Remember what I told you about him though. If he wakes up and it is only you here, do not try to smother him, just wait and talk to him. He has been damaged, and he requires healing," Tsunade said to Ino, and Ino only. No one else within the room could hear her as she spoke to Ino. "Ino, Naruto is important to me, and if you want to really know what he is really like, support him whenever it seems like he is close to breaking. He needs help more than anything right now," Tsunade finished before she smiled to Ino and left the room, leaving many of those in the room confused to what had just transpired. "So what is wrong with the kid?" Anko was the one to take the initiative and was the first to ask the question that all of them were desperate to get the answer to. "Well, I can't really tell you because it is something that is really distressing to Naruto-kun, and I would think it better if he was the one to tell you himself," Ino answered. Honestly, he had only saved her, and to have learned what she had was a show of trust enough from Tsunade, but she did not feel she had the right to give away such information so freely, and she would not. She did not need to worry about this, however, as Anko's eyebrows furrowed in a way that suggested inappropriate thoughts were running through her head. Technically it was true. "Naruto-kun, is it? My, when did this happen? I mean, he only got back 3 days ago, and even then he was exhausted beyond anything we've ever seen him like," Anko said in a voice that suggested so many different things that Inoichi was desperately trying to keep his nose from unleashing its load of blood that was steadily building up. Ino was left a spluttering mess after what Anko was insinuating. Which brought a delighted smile to the face of Anko. She was going to enjoy this. Well, he did save me from my almost certain death, and he was never a bad person. I don't see any reason why I can't call him Naruto-kun. Ino answered the older woman back, only to receive a smirk in return. So you don't think that he is a nice piece of material that you would love to have your own way with? Anko asked with the smirk still in place, and wriggling her eyebrows suggestively. I know I definitely would, Anko added with a laugh that left no doubt to what she had just said. Anko-san, please keep your desires in check until he is at least conscious. And don't be thinking you won't have any competition, Kurenai chided her friend before a smirk graced her face and everyone in the room almost face faulted again. Of all the people to say something like that, Kurenai was the least expected. The same goes for me, Kurenai-sensei. Anko-san, I have waited for him long enough and I will not miss out on my opportunity, came the surprisingly confident-sounding voice of one. Hinata. Inoichi found himself in the center of a batch of women who were basically fighting over a man they knew so very little about. It was all about his looks that they wanted him to be their own. He would not voice such opinions, however. He was not mad. It was then that he actually looked over to the figure that was Naruto. He had heard about the scare with him a few nights ago and feared for the life of the young man that had saved his daughter's life. He had not properly thanked him for that yet. On inspection, Inoichi seen that Naruto seemed to be doing okay physically. Thank you, Naruto, for saving my daughter's life. I hope that your health recovers soon, Inoichi proclaimed to the prone form of the man in the bed before bowing his head and turning out the door again, back to his duties as clan head. We thank you for saving Kyoki. We know that you could have ever so easily left her there to die, but you saved her, and we are eternally grateful, Kurenai said to the body with a smile on her face and bowed just as Inoichi had done. And when you wake up, look up Anko Mitarashi of the interrogation unit, Anko added in cheekily, as Kurenai gave her a sideways glance and Anko merely laughed it off. Both women took one last look at the blonde on the bed before bowing and making their exit. Thank you for saving Hikin, Naruto-kun. She has been trying her hardest to become a great kunoichi, and is even learning under myself and Niji. I thank you for saving one of the members of my clan as clan head. I also thank you as her carer and adoptive mother. Get better soon, please, Naruto-kun, Hinata almost begged him before bowing and following after everyone else. Ino realized that she was once again in the room herself with the blonde-haired man, and remembered Tsunade's plea for her to stay with Naruto to make sure that he was alright. She sighed as she realized she was actually in for some high amounts of discomfort if she was to stay in this place for a long period of time. Sitting down into the seat by Naruto's bedside, she began what she believed would be a long watch, until her eyes gave out on her, and she was asleep. Ino-chan? A voice called out through the darkness, and she was tempted to not even respond to the irritating noise that was impeding upon her sleep. Ino-chan? The same voice reiterated, but this time her shoulder was gently shook and her eyes opened slightly to find what was the reason for her being awoken so rudely. Only then, when she peered through the darkness of her lids, did she realize. Naruto, Ino said softly as the man before her smiled widely as she said his name. Chapter 5, A Hero Recovers. Naruto, Ino said, almost not believing the sight before her very own eyes. There was Naruto with all of his bandages across his body standing before her, once again out of his bed when he should not be. Naruto smiled at her softly as she said his name and looked down at her sleepy form. Yes, it's me, Ino-chan. What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be at home by now? I mean, you like fine again, Naruto pointed out as his eyes looked over her form, which, even though Ino was still slightly sleepy, did not stop the blush that came rushing to her face. The way his eyes looked over her body, she felt it almost as if he was appreciating her very form. I was asked if I would watch over you until you got better, Naruto-kun, Ino answered back once she had awoken enough and was finally able to talk again. Naruto looked at her and nodded his head in understanding. Once again there was silence within the room, and all Ino could do was stare at the man who was opposite her. He was sitting on his bed while facing her, but his attention was however directed towards the window of his room. Ino knew it to be childish, but she really would have preferred it if his eyes were again directed at her. She enjoyed his attention. Thank you, Ino-chan. I know that my actions a few days ago were nothing less than idiotic. I do thank you for taking care of me for so long, Naruto said as his gaze shifted from the window and back to Ino. She felt the heat traveling to her face and looked away bashfully. Honestly, what was wrong with her lately? Naruto hadn't even been back a week and she was acting like a love-struck teenager. It's no problem. You did save my own and my entire team's lives. I am in your debt, Ino answered him honestly. It was true, Naruto could have just as easily left them alone. He had no obligation to save any of them. Yet he had done so, and as such, Ino felt it only right that she repay the debt for her and her entire team. She turned to Naruto when she heard chuckling coming from his direction to indeed see him laughing lightly. You don't have to repay me, Ino-chan. There's no way I would have left you all alone. That's just not me at all, and anyway, it was part of the mission too, Naruto said as his voice became somewhat darker by the end of his statement. Ino noticed this and was intrigued. There was clearly something about the mission that had Naruto thinking about it in the negative. Of course, not many shinobi missions were enjoyable, but most were able to keep their minds off of their missions and their duties. Working up the courage, Ino asked Naruto what she had been meaning to ask him ever since he had collapsed after reporting a failed mission. Naruto? Ino asked tentatively. Naruto's head looked up at the calling of his name and Ino could see the confused look in his eyes due to the very way in which she had called his name. He however nodded his head to Ino, telling her to continue with her question, knowing for a fact that it was a question she had. What exactly was your mission? Ino asked again very tentatively. She expected Naruto to pull away instantly, and for him to put up some sort of mask that Tsunade had talked about in the past, but instead he simply sat there and stared at her, almost as if processing what she had just said. It's not exactly been one of the missions I have enjoyed, either has it been a short mission, Naruto began as he stood up onto his feet and moved over to the window of his hospital room, looking out over the landscape of his home. It was a mission to retrieve Sasuke, Naruto explained as he looked out the window, and instantly Ino was on her feet, right next to Naruto. But Tsunade said that Sasuke was dead, Ino said before she realized the words that had just escaped her mouth and covered her mouth up as fast as she could. But it was too late. She saw the hurt that crossed over Naruto's eyes. His eyes closed momentarily before they opened again, and Naruto was looking at her with a slight smile on his face. That's true, the body of Sasuke Uchiha may have very well been dead, but his soul was still living on. It was trapped within his eyes. Surely you have heard the phrase that the eyes are the window into the soul? Naruto asked as his voice croaked slightly. It was only a slight croak, but Ino heard it, and knew that talking about Sasuke was tough for Naruto. But he was bravely continuing onwards. Ino nodded her head at Naruto's question, and he continued on. After Sasuke died, I refused to believe it, and even after the war was over and peace had been found, I could not accept his death. I had heard tale that Sasuke's burial site had been pillaged and went into a rage. It took Tsunade, Kakashi Yamato, Killer Bee and the Raikage to stop me from going berserk. Naruto continued on, leaving Ino gaping at those last few words. It took that many powerful people to keep just Naruto from going berserk. I never knew that his grave was disturbed, Ino admitted. She had never heard anything like that. No one that she knew besides those mentioned did, or they just never told her. Naruto looked to Ino with those dead and defeated eyes she hated to see on anyone. No one else but those five knew, and it was to be kept that way. After that episode they all agreed it was safer to not let anyone know that the grave had been desecrated. Otherwise words could be spoken and they knew I'd have no mercy, Naruto said in a dangerous voice. Ino was really worrying about Naruto. His emotions seemed to be in almost turmoil. He would be happy one moment, then sad. Now he was angry. What was the worst though, was the very reason for his grave to be disturbed. When I was taken to the grave, his eyes they were, Naruto said before he could not continue onwards, and his tears that he had been holding back so valiantly began to fall to the ground at his feet. Ino knew that her moment to act was here and done what seemed like the correct thing to do. She wrapped her arms around Naruto. They were stolen by that Haruza, weren't they? Ino asked as she rested her head against his back. Naruto stiffened at the sudden contact behind him and was about to turn to her, but found he could not. The embrace was so comforting and he had gone far too long without any form of comfort being directed at him. As such he melted into the embrace and he relaxed. Ino felt him relaxing and smiled against his back. At least he was accepting her help. No, he did not steal Sasuke's eyes, he only had one of them. I don't know how it happened, but his eyes were split between two people. I killed the first one without mercy and released half of Sasuke's soul to peace, Naruto explained, at which Ino moved her head from his back and looked up to the form of Naruto, still staring out of the window. I got the first man within the first week of searching. It was Haruza that I was looking for. After that, Naruto continued as his bodily posture seemed to straighten out. So it took you 5 years to find Haruza? Was he that good at hiding? Ino asked, curious as to how it had taken Naruto quite so long to find the other owner of Sasuke's other eye. Naruto chuckled slightly at that and caused Ino to let go of him and wheeled him around to face her. Why are you laughing? I thought you were supposed to be hurting, Ino asked, and honestly did not know why she was getting so worked up about this. I am laughing because you make it seem almost easy. It is hard to know who had a Sharingan, especially if they can conceal it like the Uchihas could. Also, it was not only Sasuke's Sharingan that were stolen. Madara's lab that held hundreds of Sharingan was pillaged too, meaning that there were many shinobi far and wide that had Sharingan, Naruto explained as he looked down at the flustered form of Ino. Yes, I am hurting over this, Ino, but you wanted to know, and I thought you would at least understand if I tried to lighten the mood, Naruto said to her in a somewhat annoyed tone. I do understand, but you shouldn't lie to yourself for my sake. Ino cried back as Naruto was taken aback by the sheer ferocity in which Ino had spoken. Soon the tears reappeared and Naruto felt unsteady on his feet. Falling back slightly, he felt Ino pushing against his weight to try and support him. She softly moved backwards with him until they were near the bed. Then she moved and let Naruto sit back down on the bed. You should stay in your bed if you are not able to stand yet, Naruto-kun, Ino said in a very caring manner that had Naruto looking at her in wonder. She showed so much care for him. It was something he enjoyed. To have someone care about him was not something he was overly used to. The only ones he knew that really did care about him, at full capacity, were Tsunade, Kakashi and Sasuke. To have Ino acting as if she cared just as much made Naruto feel happy, very happy indeed. I don't have to lie to myself too much now, Ino-chan. Sasuke is finally at peace. My mission is complete, Naruto said as he moved on his bed until he was sitting on it with a space next to him, which he patted and indicated that Ino sit next to him, which she complied with. What she had not expected to happen was for Naruto to lean over and grab her shoulders. Pulling her towards him, she was suddenly pulled against his tough chest. She was scared at first with the action but smiled when she looked up and saw his eyes closed and a happy smile on his face. If this made him happy, then she would happily oblige too. They both sat in silence for a long time. They had not moved from their embrace. Naruto had made no motion to move, and Ino had yet to find any better place to be than where she was at that moment and time. His arms just promised her so many things: safety, strength, and caring. What more could she really ask for? Thank you for caring so much, Ino-chan. Not very many people have made me feel quite as happy as you've managed to make me feel right now, Naruto said to her as her face lit up in happiness. There was something about his happiness that was worrying her though. She had seen the way in which Naruto's emotions had jumped when he was explaining his mission to her, and she worried if his mind had maybe been compromised. And just now he seemed to be fine though. She would be keeping a watch on him as she had been asked to do. That's alright, Naruto. I promise I will care for you just like I always should have. You don't have to think that you are all alone anymore, Ino said as she hugged into him tighter, closing her eyes at the same time. Naruto smiled at her words and hugged into her closer. Ino-chan? Naruto asked softly, causing said woman to look up at him with a genuine smile on her face. This caused Naruto to smile internally too. Despite his warring emotions in his head, that smile made him feel slightly at ease. Do you mind sleeping with me tonight? I don't want to sleep alone because I have been doing that for too long now, and I think you would prefer something better than that chair, Naruto said softly. He was not even trying to insinuate anything with his words. He genuinely did not want to go to sleep alone tonight. His dreams were always bad alone, and the few times he was with someone, they were usually calmer. Ino looked at him for a few moments, and could see by his very demeanor that he was not trying to pull anything funny. He just wanted company, and she would not deny that the invitation did make her slightly happy too. Sure, Naruto-kun, Ino answered softly before she climbed onto the bed next to Naruto. As she maneuvered on the bed, Naruto moved to give her the space she required, and only when she seemed comfortable did he lay down again. Ino was close to sleeping when she felt his arms once again wrapping around her. Turning around slightly, she could see that he was not even awake when he had done that. He had literally held onto her in his sleep. She smiled at the sweet gesture and snuggled into him before again trying to sleep herself. Soon enough she too was asleep. A few hours later. Any reason that you are here and not in your bed? Tsunade asked out into the apparently empty room of her office. From her left near the window a figure came out of the shadows and moved over to the front of her desk. There before her stood Naruto. He was fully clothed again and looked ready to work. Like hell that was going to happen. Come on, Bachan, you know how much I hate hospitals, Naruto said with his trademark foxy smile that had Tsunade smiling herself. Honestly, the durability of this kid scared her sometimes. To think that less than half a week ago his health was in question just went on to show her how strong this man before her was. She knew for a fact that if he still had his dream of becoming Hokage, it was within reach now. Yes, I do, but you are supposed to stay in there until you are all better. Are you all better? Tsunade asked, truly unsure if he was here with his injuries healed or if he had just forced his body to move to where it was right now. Naruto removed his top half of clothing without any words, much to what Tsunade was not expecting, but it did help make things clearer. She could see that he had definitely been busy over the years. His body was a finely tuned machine now, but it was crisscrossed with far too many scars for someone his age. His chest was a maze of cuts and a few large scars that looked like impact areas. Happy, Bachan? My body made a full recovery last night, Naruto explained, at which Tsunade could only stare at him in disbelief. How could it be possible that his body make such a rapid recovery after the state he had been in over the last week, or however long his body had actually been in that condition? How is this possible? Tsunade asked as she got up and moved over to Naruto. She moved her hand over his body to make sure that it was not a farce but could detect no traces of anything covering over his body. It was true, Naruto had made a full recovery even though with the way it had looked a few days ago, he may have actually died. I don't know, Naruto answered honestly. He had no earth of an idea how it had happened either. He just woke up with a body that did not hurt in the slightest. With a warm body pulled against his own, he smiled when he realized it was Ino. Well, it does seem like your body has made a full recovery. After my inspection it does not appear like you are in any fatal risk. I would just advise that you take it easy for a while, okay? Tsunade said as she moved around her desk to sit down again, and then looked up to Naruto. Now, what was the real reason that you were here for? Tsunade asked as she looked to the form of the man that now smiled down on her. Well, I have missed out on quite a bit over the last 5 years, so I was wondering if there were any of my friends that were out on missions just now. Naruto asked as he smiled and closed his eyes while he rubbed the back of his head. Tsunade looked at him for a few seconds before a smile of her own appeared, and she looked at the pile of papers next to her. Looking through the papers, Naruto watched quietly, waiting for her to reply to him before he felt a gust of air behind him and immediately ducked. Naruto! Two voices shouted out, causing Tsunade to look up from her paperwork at the sudden screaming within her room. It was funny, she hadn't even heard her door opening. She was definitely getting too old for this. Sakura and Ino both stood back to back with their arms outstretched and their fists tightly clenched. And with Naruto being against her desk and the name they had shouted, Tsunade had a good idea why they were here. I just told him not be too strenuous on himself, and you both tried to attack him. I really am getting too old for this, Tsunade said while the two girls looked at her apologetically. Sorry Tsunade-sama, but Naruto scared us when Ino woke up and didn't know where he was, and I went in to check on him, and he had disappeared. We thought he'd be here, Sakura explained while she glared at Naruto. In all honesty, it was not a hateful glare, more the type one uses when they have been scared over something that means a great deal to them. I'm just glad that he is alright, Ino said, and it was true. She had thought he had done a runner when she woke up without him behind her. Then Sakura had walked in and they both got worried and rushed over to the Hokage Tower, and that lead up to where they were just then. So, Bachan, where is everyone? Naruto asked as he once again turned to Tsunade, who was smiling at the scene before her. It was cute to see that he was oblivious to the amount that he clearly meant to the two women. Even after going through such emotional turmoil, maturing greatly over the last 5 years, he was still really dense when it came to things like women. You are in luck, Gaki. All of your friends from the academy are actually in the village just now. As for where they are, I don't have a clue. Wherever they usually are, I guess, Tsunade said as she shrugged her shoulders. It was the truth. She only knew where they were on missions, not when they were within the village. That was their own business. I can take Naruto around. After all, he hasn't been home since Konoha was rebuilt. He won't know where things are anymore, Ino pointed out as she moved beside Naruto. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. He did kind of forget about that bit. Very well, Ino. Sakura, you may have the rest of the day off to get reacquainted with Naruto, Tsunade told her student, who looked at her happily. Thank you, Tsunade-sama. Sakura smiled before she walked over to the other side of Naruto. Both she and Ino took one of Naruto's arms and lead him out of the office, leaving a grinning Tsunade. Please bring him back in one piece, girls. He is only back and he has only just recovered. He does need some rest, Tsunade said out loud to no one in particular. That's true. It's amazing he has recovered quite as he had, especially since his life was in question 3 days ago, came a voice from Tsunade's window, to which she turned to and found Kakashi perched on the windowsill. How long have you been there? Tsunade asked neutrally, at which Kakashi just simply smiled and held out 4 envelopes, each with a stamp of varying color and logo. Long enough, but other matters are the reason that I am here, Kakashi said rather urgently for a man like himself. Tsunade caught on to his urgency, and immediately took the letters from him. What are these? Tsunade asked Kakashi, who moved into the room by now and stood opposite her while she sat in the chair at her desk. They are letters indicating to you that the Tsuchikage, Kazekage, Reikage and Mizukage are all on their way here and wish to see Naruto ASAP when they get here, Kakashi said while not noticing the tick mark that appeared on Tsunade's head. What the hell was the point in giving me the letters if you already knew? Tsunade yelled, causing Kakashi to sweat drop. That's because I gave a general overview, whereas the letters are all different depending on who sent them. I only told you what they all were basically saying together, Kakashi answered as he took baby steps towards the window, really wanting to make a hasty retreat now. I suppose that does make sense. So how well do you really think Naruto has recovered? Tsunade asked without even looking up. She knew for a fact that the same thing was on Kakashi's mind as was on hers. The sigh that she heard moments after asking that question only reinforced her superstitions. I think he's put up his mask to try and hide his pain, and he won't let it slip, especially not around his friends. And we both know how well he can hide things. Those seals all across his body were used to hide all of his injuries, and some of those injuries were definitely very old, Kakashi said as Tsunade nodded her head in agreement. When Naruto had fallen, unknown to all but herself and Kakashi, they had seen the dull glow of seals being released, and that was when the injuries were clear to be seen. I still don't understand why he hid his injuries like that. He was always such a quick healer, Tsunade said to the silver-haired Jonin honestly, and he nodded his own head this time. I think I do, Tsunade-sama, although it will not sound like the best of things I can say about my student, Kakashi admitted, receiving a look from Tsunade. She had a feeling she was not going to like this but would listen to him nonetheless. Of course he would know more about Naruto than her. He taught Naruto for a short while. She nodded her head despite her unwillingness to do so. I believe that after each successive fight Naruto fought, he did not give his body the required time to heal, nor did he give it the time to get rid of any poisons within his bloodstream. What I am saying is that Naruto has fought more than half of his opponents at half strength, Kakashi began as Tsunade sat and listened to him. She didn't like it, but she would have to accept it for now. I think that after the episode where he almost became the Ninetales personified, he blocked off the Ninetales completely. Even its healing ability, and with it being so closely linked to his own healing, it basically shut down his body's ability to heal, Kakashi finished, and Tsunade had to admit that she did agree with Kakashi's analogy. That did make some sense. How does he do it? I mean, how can he put up a mask of happiness when he knows that those around him love him enough to care about him even if he is sad? He doesn't have to prove himself to anyone. Even the villagers that once hated him have come to respect him, Tsunade said as her voice croaked slightly. She really hated the way Naruto was acting now. It was not the way she knew him to be. Naruto is overconsiderate of those he cares about, to the extent that he does not want to make them sad whenever he is. When everyone is happy, he tries to fool himself into thinking that he is too, Kakashi said as he looked out of the Hokage office's window down onto a pathway that currently had Naruto, Ino and Sakura walking down it. Whereas internally he is damaged. I don't even need to be a Yamanaka and look through his mind to know that it is damaged. Sasuke meant too much to Naruto for him to simply accept he is gone, Kakashi continued as he turned on Tsunade, and a look of determination the like Tsunade had never seen on. Kakashi covered his face. Tsunade-sama, as disrespectful as this may sound, neither you nor Naruto were correct about Naruto's mission, Kakashi said in a voice that exuded confidence along with sorrow. You said to Ino Yamanaka that Naruto failed in his mission to retrieve Sasuke. That may very well have been true, but that had happened before he left for this mission that has taken him 5 years. Tsunade-sama, Naruto's mission was to save Sasuke's soul that had been stolen in the form of his eyes, and he succeeded. Sasuke's soul can now rest in peace because of what Naruto has done for him, Kakashi finished off as he once again was staring at the figure of Naruto. He does not believe that though, he thinks that he failed, Tsunade said sadly, bringing Kakashi's attention back to her again, and he had to admit that she was correct. Naruto did not believe he had succeeded, instead he felt he had failed. Send him to me, I will talk to him. I'll help him however I possibly can, Kakashi said as he turned on the spot and moved over to the window he had previously entered. I will be at Training Ground 7, Kakashi finished before he shined away. Tsunade looked down at Naruto as he walked with both women at his sides. She wished she could smile at the sight as she had earlier, but she was reminded that what she saw was partly a facade. ANBU, please retrieve Naruto and take him to the training ground Kakashi will be at, and please apologize to Ino and Sakura for me, Tsunade asked as an ANBU with a hawk mask appeared in her room, nodded his head and once again disappeared. Naruto had been walking with the two women for a while now and was beginning to wonder where it was they were exactly taking him. He had thought that a tour of the village would entail him seeing all the new things. He had seen many new things but knew nothing of them yet. If this was a tour, it was done very poorly. Naruto, what's wrong? You've been awfully quiet. Sakura asked as she tugged on his left arm, and Ino looked up at him too, noticing that he had been quiet for some time too, and then she looked at Sakura due to the way that she was acting around Naruto. Oh, how things change, Ino thought to herself. Oh, nothing, Sakura-chan, just been looking at all the new stuff. Konoha sure has changed in the last few years, Naruto said as he plastered a smile on his face that made Sakura blush slightly at the attention she was given. She didn't think Naruto would be quite so nice after things that happened in the Land of Iron. Right before them a puff of smoke appeared and from it emerged an Anbu with a hawk mask. Naruto looked at the man before he removed Ino and Sakura's grip from his person, even if both women done so unhappily. What is the problem, Anbu-san? Naruto asked politely, to which the Anbu bowed slightly before he answered, taking Ino and Sakura by surprise. Naruto-sama, I have been asked to take you to Kakashi-senpai at Training Ground 7 by order of Hokage-sama. She also sends her apologies to Ino-san and Sakura-san. The matter is extremely urgent, the Anbu answered, at which Ino and Sakura looked at each other worriedly. What was so wrong that Kakashi had to urgently see Naruto? Very well, sorry Ino-chan, Sakura-chan, looks like I have to go and see Kakashi-sensei. I'll talk to you guys later, Naruto said as he turned to them and gave them both an earth-shattering smile that had both women struggling not to give him one back, only larger. And with that Naruto was gone in a yellow flash, leaving all three of them staring at where he had once been. Wasn't the? Sakura began only for the Anbu to finish what she had been saying. The fourth Hokage's flying thunder god technique that had definitely caught all of them unawares. Who would have thought that Naruto could perform yet another of the fourth's techniques? Training Ground 7, Kakashi-sensei, how can I help you? Naruto asked as he appeared before his old sensei, who was currently leaning against a tree with his usual orange book out. When Naruto posed his question, Kakashi finally looked up at Naruto. Yes, I brought you out here because I wish to talk to you, but I realize that talking might not be the therapy that you need. The haste with which you came here indicates to me that you may be stressed, and as such we shall not talk yet, Kakashi said as he placed his book within a pouch at his waist and brought his hand to his front, into position. Naruto could see where this was going and as such moved into the Hyuga stance. I see that talking might only worsen your mood, but I knew you always enjoyed a good spar, and as such we shall fight until all of your stress is relieved, Naruto. Come on, give me it all. Kakashi yelled as he stood in his position waiting for Naruto to make a move. He did not. Naruto, I know you are in pain. You are a fool if you think I cannot see it. If you do not unleash it, you cannot hope to keep those you care about safe. Direct it all at me. I am the only man who can hope to withstand it all. Kakashi yelled before Naruto's hands came up to his head, and he screamed out in pain. Kakashi-sensei. Naruto roared as his head snapped up and Kakashi could see the eyes with concentric circled and Tomo. The red chakra swirled all around Naruto, and suddenly he was right before him in a flash of red, with his hand stretched back ready to strike. Chapter 6. Back to normal. Had his senses been any less finely tuned than they were, Kakashi had no doubt that at that moment, and time, his head may very well have had a very large dent in its surface. He had seen the red flash appear in front of him, and only just in time did he manage to duck under the fist that had come straight towards him. Naruto had not stopped, however, as his fist passed over Kakashi. His other one was also performing actions. Naruto's other hand came shooting towards Kakashi, completely coated in the red chakra that was still all over his body, and aimed his palm towards Kakashi's stomach. Hakusho! Naruto yelled as he expelled all of the chakra built up into his hand, and sent a huge plume of pressurized air into Kakashi's stomach. Kakashi felt the full force of the attack and was propelled backwards, only for his form to shimmer before turning into a fall of water. Mizu Bunshin, Naruto contemplated before turning on the spot and looking into the very water at the edge of the land that he stood. Without moving, he simply raised his right hand and brought it down again in quick succession, smashing the ground with chakra applied to his punch. A crack formed and made its way to the shoreline where it then descended to the ground under the water. Eventually a mushroom of water leapt upwards with the form of Kakashi flying out with it. Nice trick, Kakashi-sensei, but you will have to try better than that, Naruto yelled to his former teacher, as he once again rushed towards the Jonin. Kakashi looked at Naruto again, and had to hold back an eye smile. If it wasn't for the circumstances in which Naruto had gained such ability, and their current predicament, Kakashi would have been happy to simply congratulate Naruto on his achievement in surpassing him. Kakashi landed on solid ground once again to see Naruto charging at him. He did not disappear in a slash this time though. Kakashi was surprised at first until he realized that Naruto was currently doing one-handed seals with both hands while he ran. Kakashi almost fell over when he recognized the seals. No way was all Kakashi could say before his suspicions were indeed confirmed. As Naruto closed and his hands were covered in the shining and sparkling forms of Chidori, Kakashi just stared at Naruto before his base functions kicked in, and he dodged a strike otherwise intended for his chest. Naruto's back was open to Kakashi at that moment, and he brought down his hand in a chopping motion in order to get his shoulder that was currently exposed to him. Applying chakra so that it would have at least some form of effect against Naruto, Kakashi brought his hand down hard. What he had not anticipated was for Naruto's body to so nimbly work around his hand. With Naruto now directly in front of him, and his own arm outstretched, Kakashi was staring death in the face as his own jutsu came screeching towards his face. The screeching noise was so close to his face, yet he felt no pain of being hit at all. Opening his eyes that he just realized were closed, Kakashi was looking directly at a hand pointed right at him, 2 fingers pointing in his direction with the energies of lighting coursing all over the surface of the hand. You better start taking this seriously, Kakashi-sensei. If you want to take all of my pain and anger, I am not going to hold back, Naruto said to his instructor as an almost sadistic smirk crossed over his features. Kakashi nodded his head knowingly. He had just had a close call there just now. Despite his refined skills over years of being a shinobi, he had almost been beaten so easily. He was once again stopping himself for congratulating his student as he so wished to do. This was a time to vent, not impress. Kakashi reached up to where his Konoha headband covered over his Sharingan eye and removed it. Naruto stared at the red eye with black designs before his smirk returned. Naruto could see the black designs of his eyes, and they were symbolizing how seriously Kakashi was taking him now. He raised his right hand up to over his mouth and inhaled deeply while never once taking his eyes off Naruto. Then moving his hand away slightly, he exhaled again deeply over his hand. From his mouth a stream of wind moved and went on to cover Kakashi's hand. As it done so and the last of the wind exited Kakashi's mouth, the wind began to screech as if unhappy about being out in the actual world. Kakashi whipped his hand behind him before he sped over to where Naruto was standing, simply staring at him. Bringing his hand upwards again in a chopping motion, Kakashi tried to bring his hand across Naruto's chest, only for Naruto to casually capture Kakashi's outstretched hand within his own. Kakashi was left staring at the man that was once his student. No longer was he a knucklehead, nor a dead last. No, he was a master shinobi. There were very few people that could stop the screaming slash. Even fewer still that could do so with their bare hands. Kakashi looked to his student with pride. He had certainly improved, but that was by far not the best jutsu he had within his arsenal. Hey Kakashi-sensei, I thought I was the one supposed to be venting out, Naruto asked as he looked to the somewhat sheepish face of Kakashi, finding it rather funny. Suddenly Naruto's light-hearted tone disappeared and Kakashi felt force acting upon his body he had known only a few times. Fear, indescribable, unmissable, unbridled fear. I think I am the one that's supposed to be venting out, Naruto almost yelled as he cast Kakashi away very easily, leaving Kakashi standing on one of the trunks of a tree. Naruto raised his right hand into the air as his vision never once left Kakashi's form. In his hand a Rasengan began to form. Kakashi took notice of the lack of shadow clones and guessed that Naruto must have finally figured out how to create the Rasengan without them. With a proud nod, Kakashi dropped from the tree trunk to the ground again and prepared a Rasengan of his own, fight fire with fire and whatnot. It was only then that Kakashi realized there was something very, very different between the Rasengan that he was charging in comparison to the one that Naruto was charging up. First of all being that Kakashi's was simply a normal Rasengan of size capable of fitting in his hand, regular size. Naruto's was much larger than he had ever seen a Rasengan before. The thing was already larger than Naruto himself, and yet he was holding it above his head so effortlessly. The next thing that Kakashi noticed to his horror was the things surrounding the Rasengan. Water was being dragged out of the small lake. Wind was being sucked right out of the air. Fire was being spontaneously ignited. Lightning was running from his opposite hand onto the Rasengan, and there was plenty of earth rising upwards to meet with the Rasengan. Then came to most terrifying thing in Kakashi's opinion. The thing was black, pure midnight black. And not only that but all the different elemental affinities that Kakashi never knew Naruto to have, were being sucked into it. This was really going to suck. Naruto roared as the last of the different affinities were sucked into the black Rasengan that he had been forming. The thing was massive. It was at least twice the size of him, but the density of the object in his hand was something unimaginable. Just holding it together was draining him of his chakra. He could waste no time and went straight for the kill. Kakashi-sensei, meet the perfect form of the Rasengan. Yami Rasengan! Naruto yelled as he brought the ball of black energy down onto the ground where Kakashi was standing. For a second nothing happened at all, then an explosion of previously unknown magnitude ripped out from the epicenter of the impact area, causing many of the closest trees to tear free of their roots and fly away with the amount of wind produced. Whole areas of land that used to be Training Ground 7 were uprooted, and currently Naruto was standing upon one of the highest pieces of land that had been upturned, looking out over their battleground, hoping he hadn't killed his sensei. After all, he said he could take all of Naruto's pain. Well, he condensed it all into that ball. My, well, that was dangerous. If I hadn't been taught this technique by the Raikage, I may be dead right now, Kakashi joked right behind Naruto, causing the young man to turn slowly with a smile on his face. He was met with the sight of Kakashi standing behind him with no clothing on his body, the top half at least. Replacing that, however, were the roiling energies that were lightning all over his torso. Although somehow his mask was still on his face, that thing just had to be made of adamantium or something. Good to see I didn't kill you, Kakashi-sensei. That would have hurt if you died, Naruto said in a half-joking, half-serious manner that Kakashi didn't know quite how to take but just went with his best bet. Don't worry about it, though that was some scary technique, Kakashi admitted as he stared off in the distance at the wreckage of the training ground. Tsunade was going to have his balls for this. Feeling any better then? Kakashi asked as he directed his attention back to the blonde-haired man who was standing opposite him, staring into the trees. Much better, but you see, I got rid of all that negative feeling in my mind, but I still have a lust for a good fight. I really haven't had one for a while. Do you mind, Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked as he looked directly at Kakashi, and he could see those oceanic blue eyes that seemed to be pleading with him on their own. It was final. Naruto was finally back. Kakashi could not have been happier. I'll spar with you, on one condition, Kakashi said as Naruto looked at him confused before Kakashi continued. You must remove your shirt too, Kakashi finished simply, at which Naruto crossed his arms over his chest and jumped backwards. Kakashi-sensei, I'm not that into you, Naruto responded in a fearful tone that had Kakashi waving his hand in front of himself, desperately trying to defuse the situation that was not what he meant. No. Naruto, we both know that I have a form of fan club, shall we say, and if they are to see me without torso clothing, they shall be ravenous. That is just a scary thing to see, so if we both are the same, attention may be directed away from me and shall be divided between us, Kakashi reasoned, at which Naruto looked at him suspiciously. Kakashi sighed. Admittedly, that's the first time I've had to use that technique when I did not have a spare shirt or something with me. It seems to have a way of destroying clothing only on the top half. Actually, thank God for that, it's only the top half, Kakashi finished after thinking of some scary thoughts, including him running away naked from a barrage of women. Okay, Kakashi-sensei, but we will be sparring with no holding back, alright? I want to see how you've improved as much as you want to see how well I've done, Naruto chimed out as he turned on the spot and looked over his shoulder. We can also test out who is the fastest user of the different thunder techniques, Naruto said before his entire torso was covered in lightning and his clothing all disappeared, leaving him in only his black shinobi pants and black battle sandals. Jumping over to the opposite side of the ravine created by his darkness Rasengan, Naruto turned back to look at Kakashi. Remember, no holding back, Naruto yelled over to his former sensei. Kakashi nodded his head before the lightning reignited over his body and he charged two Chidori in his hands. Let's go! Naruto yelled as he mirrored Kakashi's movements, and was also covered in lightning with two Chidoris charged, both closed in on each other, roaring. A few hundred meters away. Hey, what's going on? Ino half whispered, half yelled to the pink-haired woman who was currently standing on her shoulders, trying to look over the new piece of terrain in the area, a very large rock where once the path used to be. Ino's body was beginning to groan under the strain of Sakura's weight, and she considered dropping her. Well, Kakashi-sensei and Naruto-kun are fighting and have basically destroyed the training grounds, Sakura answered as she leapt down from Ino's shoulders, much to her happiness. If we move up into the trees we should get a better view of their fight, Sakura added as she began to casually walk up the side of one of the trees right to the top, Ino close behind her. Once they had reached the summit of the trees they stared out across the destroyed landscape with jaws hitting the ground again almost. In the ravine that had been created they could see lightning discharges ringing out as blows were being directed from two different sources at each other. There were no clear discernible figures amongst the flashes of light, but they could definitely tell that it was two powerful adversaries were fighting it out. Those two are scary, Ino pointed out as she watched Kakashi and Naruto leaping from wall to wall in the ravine, placing blows all over the place, with lightning discharges shooting off afterwards. Sakura turned to her friend after what she had said with an almost knowing smile. After Naruto-kun disappeared, Kakashi-sensei felt like a complete failure to us all. Sasuke was dead and it looked like Naruto was going rogue. He trained himself for so long after Naruto-kun left. He worked himself into the ground so many times just so that he could get stronger, Sakura began as she continued to stare out onto the battle between the two men. Her sudden pause had Ino turning to look at her. What's wrong, Sakura? Ino asked when she saw that Sakura was watching the two men with interest at the highest level Ino had ever saw Sakura look in Naruto's direction. Sakura's jaw opened but no words came out, and only when Ino hit her on the shoulder did Sakura finally find the function to talk again. Sorry, Kakashi-sensei was trying his hardest to get stronger so that he could retrieve Naruto. He had seen how strong Naruto was by the end of the war, and knew he would have to be vastly powerful to even try to get close to Naruto. Sakura finished off as she still stared at the fight. It was really starting to irk Ino greatly. Very well, you answered one of my questions, now hear another one. Why are you not even looking at me when you talk to me? Ino asked as a tick mark appeared on her head. Still Sakura refused to answer her, and Ino was ready to hit Sakura again until her hand was suddenly caught. She turned her gaze to look and found that none other than Niji Hyuga was standing there stopping her from hitting Sakura. Ino-san, I do believe that her excuse would be the same as many of your fellow kunoichi here as to the reason why they are not able to draw their eyes away from the battle. Niji answered with an almost amused voice, somewhat weird, but ever since the Chunin exams he had been improving towards being more open and outgoing. Ino raised her eyebrow at his words and looked around her to find that there were actually a fair amount of shinobi surrounding hers and Sakura's position, at varying levels of trees just above the highest peaks of rubble. On closer inspection, Ino found that most of the Rookie 11 was there along with many of the Jonin senseis, and along with the Hokage and Shizen. She could also see the looks that many of the shinobi were giving the fight. It was a mix of fear and admiration with overwhelming respect. When she looked to the kunoichi, however, she found that many of their jaws were hitting the floor, and that their eyes were betraying a hunger she had never seen in many of their eyes before, save maybe Anko. It was only then that Ino finally looked to where all of the commotion was coming from. Once she finally focused in on the battle, she found the reason that so many of the kunoichi could not take their eyes off of the fight. First and foremost amongst them was the clearly obvious level of power and skill posed by both men. It was a battle like no other where their strikes seemed to rind out amongst the very earth. The second reason was the fact that both men were fighting so harshly, without clothes covering their torso. For the older generation of kunoichi, they were given the sight of one of the strongest shinobi in the village who hid himself behind a mask. Despite the fact it was still there somehow, without any clothing on his torso, and by God they approved the sight wholeheartedly. His body was not rippling with muscles, but they were not in short supply. His build was strong and at the same time lean, showing how his body was as agile and flexible as it was. The one who held everyone's eyes though, even some of the older generation, was Naruto though. His body was on par with Kakashi's, if not even better. The eye candy that he provided for every kunoichi had them all almost drooling while staring at his chest. It was an almost exact same build to Kakashi's, but had many numerous scars across it that seemed like a maze, not easily solved. Niji left Ino and Sakura to their staring and went to join his team, where admittedly Tenten was simply staring at the scene too, but he had Rock Lee who was standing still watching the fight with deep concentration. The most notable difference about Rock Lee after such a huge expanse of time will have to be down to the fact that his previous exuberance had died down slightly. He no longer had his bowl cut but instead allowed his hair to grow out a bit. Niji-kun, are you watching this fight with just as much respect as I? Lee asked his teammate as he came to a rest next to Lee. Niji looked to his teammate with a smile. Ever since he had lost his exuberance, Niji had been able to strand Lee more and more until they were as close as comrades could possibly be, verging on brotherhood. I think I may be Lee. This fight has got so much fighting prowess and skill behind it that I would love to have my own opportunity to fight either of them, Niji answered as they watched Naruto and Kakashi clash and stop dead in their tracks, trying their hardest to force against each other for dominance. The roiling energies of the lightning showed up the sheer amount of power being used at that moment and time. I thought that Naruto-kun only had an affinity for wind? Lee asked his comrade as Niji himself had also wondered about that. He turned to his comrade and shrugged his shoulders. Who knows, I mean this is Naruto we're talking about here, the man who could take on a prodigy, and when Niji answered Lee, remembering when Naruto had beat him through sheer determination when no one believed it possible. They both watched as Naruto and Kakashi pushed against each other at a great amount of force, and caused their opposite to fly off in the opposite direction. Naruto ended up landing on the wall of the ravine while Kakashi landed on the floor of the ravine looking up at Naruto. Naruto raised both of his hands up to the heavens and thunderclouds began to form over them. Everyone, even the kunoichi, took notice of this. Ino watched as the strongest lightning technique she had ever seen was being prepared once again. She gasped when she realized just how serious the fight was getting but dared not interrupt, lest she trample on the honor of Kakashi. The man must have been doing this for a reason. Back with Naruto and Kakashi. Seems like we have an audience now, Naruto. Kakashi yelled up at the blonde-haired man who was standing on the side of the ravine's wall. Naruto looked out the corner of his eye and could see that indeed there was many different shinobi of the leaf were watching his and Kakashi's fight intently. Shall we give them a better show than Kakashi-sensei? Naruto yelled back as his eyes flashed and took on the purple eyes with concentric circles and Tomo. Kakashi saw the flash that covered Naruto's eyes and instantly was on high alert. Those eyes were damn dangerous. Naruto's arms rose into the air with Chidori still running across his hands. Above them thunderclouds started to roll in and Kakashi realized that Naruto had taken his ability to whole new levels to control the element to this level. Kakashi allowed the powers of Chidori to die off in his hands and instead began to cover his hands in pure wind, meaning his hand could rhetorically cut through most things like butter. He then waited until Naruto made his move before he would make a move to attempt to stop it. He knew that chances were probably slim by now. Naruto brought his hands down at a 90-degree angle and bursting through the clouds came an absolutely monstrous-sized Korean dragon comprised entirely of lighting. Kakashi stared at the thing dumbly for a few moments, as it made its rapid descent towards him and his imminent end. Kirin! Naruto yelled as the large dragon of lightning made its hasty descent towards Kakashi. He had to act fast, and only just remembering that he had wind swirling around his hands he lifted them from his sides and clapped them together. Kamikaze! Kakashi yelled out as an arrow of pure wind flew upwards to meet with the dragon of lightning. Yet as it continued on its ascension, the form changed until it was a dragon of pure wind. It was then that both techniques met in midair and both dragons roared, causing sound waves to ripple out along the land. Both dragons fought in the air for dominance of the very air. The lightning dragon moved to encircle his enemy only to pass right through the wind dragon, which then solidified again and clamped its jaw down hard onto the neck of the lightning dragon. With a roar of defeat, the lightning dragon exploded and took the wind dragon with it. Naruto looked to his sensei with a great sense of pride in the man who had been his sensei, as Kakashi looked to his student in the same fashion. He had definitely come a long way since his days of the academy, where most people believed he'd be lucky if Naruto made it past Genin. Maybe he hadn't, but that was only official rank. By skill and prowess, he was easily Kage level. That's not all I have, Kakashi-sensei. I have one last technique that no one has seen for 6 years. It has the power to devastate and annihilate. Naruto began as he leapt off of his vantage point high above and straight into the clouds that had been created with the destruction of both elemental dragons. When he appeared through the other side, Kakashi could see that he had his arms crossed over his chest. Confused as to what he was doing, he did not move. This is the power of the Sage of the Six Paths. Naruto yelled as he landed onto the ground right in front of Kakashi, the space between them being only a few feet. Kakashi's eyes widened at such a proclamation and watched as Naruto's arms shot outwards, with his arms being pointed in exact opposite directions to his side. He looked directly at Kakashi, and Kakashi saw the purple eyes with concentric circles flash before Naruto's next words. Shinra Tensei! Naruto called out, and suddenly there was a massive expulsion of force acting outwards from Naruto. Kakashi was so unprepared for such a technique to be used, and as such was thrown into the air and knocked out almost instantly. A low supply of chakra with using the Sharingan so long and the sheer force used behind that technique put him out of it almost instantly. Everyone who was watching within the trees watched as the village-destroying technique was now once again in the world and under the control of none other than the village. Jinchuriki. Tsunade especially watched with much interest and trepidation. The man who had destroyed their village had used that technique, and now Naruto had it. That would definitely make things harder for him if he had one of the village's greatest enemies' techniques. Although maybe the fact that Naruto was viewed as the hero of the village would help him. There was a flash of yellow where Naruto once was, and then a second flash when he reappeared right next to the flying form of Kakashi, who had begun his descent towards the ground again. Naruto grabbed him and then forced his chakra out of his feet in a blast of energy, slowing both his and his sensei's descent, and ended up landing on the ground softly. With Kakashi in his arms, Naruto applied his chakra to Kakashi with the dull green glow that eventually completely covered the form of Kakashi. There were many sounds of feet touching the ground around him, and Naruto looked out the corner of his eyes to see that he was surrounded by shinobi. He was ready to use Shinra Tensei again already, but once he saw Tsunade walking up to him, he calmed down quickly. So when does Kakashi become Hokage then? Naruto asked as he seemed to be concentrating more on healing Kakashi than he was on their conversation. Tsunade was quite surprised by the question. Of all the things she could have thought he might say to her, that was not amongst the highest she had guessed at. Nevertheless, it was a question that required an answer, and she would do as asked. He was due to be appointed the position within the next 3 months. I'm sorry if this information hurts you, but you were never here and I did not know if you would return if ever, Tsunade tried to explain near the end of her answer. Naruto turned to her with a smile on his face, the likes of which Tsunade had not seen ever since before the death of Jiraiya. Yes, that was exactly how long it had been since she had really seen Naruto smile. No need to explain, Bachan, he's the only one worthy of the title. I doubt anyone else could last quite as long as he did against me, Naruto answered as he indicated the form of Kakashi in his arms still covered in the healing chakra. Tsunade watched as Kakashi was actually being healed to her surprise. She hadn't thought Naruto capable of using healing chakra, but here he was healing Kakashi to almost perfection again. When did you learn to heal? Tsunade asked as Naruto looked at her and laughed nervously. What he had expected her to ask was not what she asked. He expected more along the lines of why the hell is the training ground a ravine, and why the hell are you able to use the technique that destroyed our village? Instead he was getting asked about his ability to heal someone. Well, those 5 years didn't go to waste, you know. I trained on every aspect that could be useful to me while I was still hunting down everyone that had a Sharingan. Also helped that I could partially copy their moves too, Naruto said as his eyes flashed to those dangerous eyes that afforded him power more than he should be capable of. Those purple eyes with concentric circles and 9 tomo. Those eyes, Tsunade whispered almost to herself, but Naruto was able to hear her just fine. He knew he would get a reaction quite like that, so did not allow it to bother him. He did have the eyes of a previous enemy after all. With a sigh he then resealed his eyes so that they were back to his caring cerulean blue color. But Tsunade's expression did not change much. Yeah, I guess they may not be the best thing you've ever seen since I returned home. At least I am not going to destroy the village though, Naruto responded whilst he closed his eyes nervously, and Tsunade alongside Shizen, who was not at her side, knew that he would have been rubbing the back of his head sheepishly after acting as such. Naruto, how can you have those eyes? Tsunade asked as Naruto simply looked at her. The honest answer was a long one that he really did not want to retell just yet. He was only just out of the hospital, and in all honesty he just wanted to talk to his friends, and then go home to have what will be the greatest sleep of his life. It's a long story, Naruto said tiredly, and Tsunade could pick up on Naruto's reluctance to answer her, and figured it had to do with the fact that there were so many that were surrounding him, and Kakashi added the fact that the stares he was getting from the kunoichi must have been putting him off a bit, even if he may be a bit clueless to their intent. Very well, I shall let you away with that for now since you are just home, but I do expect to be told sooner or later. I shall leave you to get reacquainted with your friends then, Tsunade said as she began to walk off with Shizen hesitating to follow her. Tsunade noticed this and decided to tease her assistant for it. My Shizen, are you unable to take your eyes off of young Naruto? Tsunade asked while her assistant blushed up a storm, stuttering replies that were only met with a smirking Tsunade. Naruto watched and heard the whole thing and simply laughed along with it. He had no idea why Shizen could take her eyes off him, but he guessed it must have been a good reason. Naruto turned to all that had converged in the area and surveyed the entire group. It was quite a lot of people, to be honest, including his entire year group of shinobi alongside some of their senseis. Then there was also Anko, who was there for whatever reason. The ones who stuck out to him, however, were the 3 girls who were in front of Anko and Kurenai, the 3 he had saved not many days before. Everyone, I promise I'll be right back. I'm just going to drop Kakashi off at the hospital, then I'll be right back, Naruto said before even giving any of them the opportunity to answer him, and was gone in a flash of yellow and white. This left all of the shinobi and kunoichi in the area dazed as to where the blonde-haired stud had suddenly vanished to. And here I was enjoying the view too, Anko complained to Kurenai, who giggled slightly at the way in which Anko had complained. It sounded so childish while at the same time so perverse. She honestly did not know how Anko could do that. Although she could not really argue with Anko on this one, she was definitely enjoying the view of contrast between the 2 generations of shinobi. Yes, indeedy. Indeed was all Kurenai answered, with which caused Sakura, who was standing close by, to drop her jaw to the ground. Have you no decency? Anko-sen, I understand, but you too, Kurenai-sensei? Sakura asked as Kurenai looked to Anko, who shrugged her shoulders before they both looked back at Sakura. What? Are you really going to tell me that I could not enjoy that display of eye candy right before me? It was right before me and I was enjoying the sight until it was robbed from view. I would very much like to see it again, Kurenai answered, which had Anko grinning lecherously and Sakura choking on her own saliva. Again, that was something she had expected more from Anko than from Kurenai. Just before Sakura was able to say anything more, there was a secondary yellow flash, and Naruto was back with them again. He was just as he had been before, and Anko and Kurenai had victorious smirks on their faces as they were allowed to see his chest again. Told you I'd be right back, Naruto said as he grinned widely at them all. He had just left the hospital with a gracious Kakashi due to the fact he would not have to wade through the crowd of women who would undoubtedly chase him down. When Naruto did not get any response, he shrugged his shoulders and clicked his fingers. Instantly in his hand appeared a black undershirt, another white breastplate of armor, and his cloak. Applying the layers of clothing, Naruto could hear the soft moans of disappointment as he covered over his body again. After clothing himself, he looked back to everyone assembled, which was now absent Tsunade and Shizen. Right now, what have I missed? Naruto asked as he clapped his hands together and looked around everyone expectantly. They would surely have plenty to tell him. After all, it had been 5 years and he really had begun to miss everyone. With his spirits high again, he was ready to listen to everyone. Chapter 7 Reunion. Such a simple question, and it had almost everyone stumped, for lack of a better term. What had been going on in the last 5 years? Of course there had been plenty been going on. But his return had kind of outdone all of that, and none of them could currently think about the past. Forget about what we have been doing. Where have you been all of this time? Anko asked for all of them when no one was capable of coming up with a good response for the blonde man. His attention turned to the purple-haired Tokubetsu Jonin, and he smiled at her before looking around all of them and giving a nervous chuckle. Would you prefer that I tell you what I've been doing first? Naruto asked sheepishly as he rubbed the back of his head and closed his eyes. After the chorus of yes, he opened his eyes and looked to exactly who his audience were. Luckily enough for Naruto, most of his comrades from his year had stood near their teammates, and were standing in the trios that were their genin team, even though after ranking up they still sometimes worked as a team. The first trio that he saw was one he had already recently seen but still took note of. Ino Yamanaka, Shikimura Nara and Choji Akamichi were all standing wearing the exact same clothing Naruto had seen them wearing the last time he had seen them, the men when he was in hospital, and Ino of course after he woke up and saw her sleeping in the chair next to his bed. His eyes scanned over their team before moving to the next in quick motion. The next team were those that consisted of Team 8. Hinata Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka and Shino Aburame. All three had drastically changed since the last time Naruto had seen any of them. First of all were the changes to Shino. The man did not wear clothing that covered up his face but instead wore a black trench coat, completely opened, along with mostly black attire, looking like a Biki used to look. His face was however still covered as he had on a mask much like Kakashi's, taking the man's advice when deciding to lose the high-collared clothing. Kiba was the next that Naruto's eyes traced over. The boy had become a man and the dog at his side, although it had not grown too much larger, had indeed gotten bigger. As if to attest to the fact it had grown, there was a small tuft of fur upon Akamaru's back, red in color too. Kiba himself had on a black trench coat and black attire much like Shino, but he also had draped across his shoulders a large fur cape. The man's hair had also grown much too, reaching his shoulders now and making him look even more feral. Naruto's eyes made to shift over the next person too, but found them stuck on her for longer than he had anticipated. The beauty before him had his eyes demanding that they get to see her longer before he looks away. Hinata Hyuga had turned into a gorgeous young woman in Naruto's eyes. Her hair was much longer than it had been, reaching down to below her bust line. Her clothing was completely unfit to be of fighting style, and Naruto deduced that she must be the clan head by now. As he saw the faint blush that adorned her face, he reminded himself that there was a matter of great importance he had to talk to her about. The next trio his eyes saw was the 3 shinobi that had been a year older than he but were still regarded as part of their year group. This was the team that consisted of a prodigy, a weapons mistress and a taijutsu specialist. Or otherwise better known as Neji Hyuga, Tenten and Rock Lee. Neji had changed very little. He had gained height and now wore the common attire of most Konoha jonin. The only thing that might be viewed as slightly different about the man would be the softer expression that he had upon his face. He looked much calmer than he had ever used to when they were younger. Tenten had changed much. Her bun hairstyle was still in place, yet her body had certainly taken upon itself to develop, and as she had obviously opted not to change her style of clothing from her Chinese style and had much the same attire as she had when Naruto returned with Jiraiya all those years ago, well, she was definitely beautiful in Naruto's eyes. She basically wore a white shirt that showed off some of her midriff and also extenuated her bust greatly. Her bottom half was covered by a pair of green pants that were curled up at the bottom. Alongside her buns and her hair she had long bangs that reached slightly down her chest and was curled slightly. Rock Lee, Naruto noticed, was very different. His usual exuberance was gone, and Naruto almost felt as if he missed the way that he had used to act. He had first noticed it when the man was standing so quiet for quite so long, but when he looked at Rock Lee he saw a very concentrated look upon his face. He looked almost hauntingly like Madogai had once looked if he looked calmer, had longer hair and did not shout out about youth all of the time. And finally Naruto's eyes landed on the form of Sakura and he realized the lapse his memory had slightly taken. The next team there should have been include her, himself, and a man not of their world any longer. Although it constricted his heart slightly, he took solace in his belief that Sasuke's soul was in a better place now. Yet, as he looked at Sakura and her new look that consisted of a cream jonin vest with the red cross on the left breast, and her same clothing from before the war, as well as her longer hair and softer expression, he remembered that he also had unfinished business with her too. Coming back was turning out to be rather difficult. With all of his genin days buddies being assessed, Naruto then moved on to the generation above his own, those that consisted of shinobi and kunoichi like Anko, Kurenai and Guy. All of whom had stayed looking mostly the same as they had done that last time Naruto had seen them, which he had actually half expected. Then his eyes looked down to the 3 girls that he had met but only a few days before. The girls whose lives he saved from the last man in the world to have the Sharingan that was stolen. He smiled down on the trio of girls that looked exactly like they had the day he saved them, and cocked his head to the side slightly before he talked again. Would it help if you 3 young ladies knew a little bit more about me? Naruto asked softly, to which the 3 girls nodded their heads. Having only really heard about Naruto Uzumaki from stories they had heard from either their parents, or from the academy, but to hear it from the source could only make the information much more valid. Very well then, I suggest you get comfortable, this may very well take quite a while. My life story is not a short one. Naruto chuckled while all that knew him well enough grimaced at what he was implying, and by no means was he lying. His life had been no less than hectic since day one, and at the age of 21 it seemed his life was only just reaching a calm area. After a few moments that Naruto had taken in order to explain to them in brief about his growing up, the 3 girls were all looking at him in complete horror. How could you possibly grow up and not resent any of the villagers around you? Kyoki asked first of all, having Naruto's gaze move over to her and made him smile softly at her. I don't know really, all I ever wanted was for people to recognize me when I was younger. I never hated them. I only wondered why they hated me so much, Naruto answered as he looked to her, yet seeing her unconvinced look he continued on. I guess what I wanted to do at a very young age was prove to everyone that I would not be put down. I would move forward and no one would stop me, Naruto finished as Kyoki nodded her head in understanding. To her side, however, her teammate had a burning question she had wanted to ask since he had started. Didn't you ever feel lonely? A soft voice asked out, and Naruto found that it belonged to a girl with purple hair tied into a high ponytail. Her eyes, however, though beautiful, betrayed a pain he knew all too well. Of course I did. Every day of my life I was forced to fend for myself and not have any friends. I had almost no family except maybe Gigi and Tuchi and Ayam-chan, Naruto answered back as he could see the pained look cross over her features again. Her body tensed and her shoulders sagged. Standing directly in front of Ino meant that the blonde-haired woman could rest a reassuring hand on her student's shoulder. You still had some people though, didn't you? There were still at least some people who cared about you enough to at least try and lessen your suffering as a child, the girl was unable to finish as her body was racked with sobs. All present kept silent. Despite this being a joyous occasion, it was still clear that some old issues were not dealt with properly. Ino went to kneel down next to her student, but when she saw Naruto motion for her to stop, she wondered what he may be up to. You're just like me, aren't you? Maybe not the container status, but you have grown up alone, haven't you? Naruto asked softly as the girl looked up at him through teary eyes. He bowed his head and walked forwards. He stood directly before her and knelt down before looking up, directly into her eyes. I grew up with a beast contained within my body, a beast everyone in the village hated me for. I was often beaten and attacked because of this. Naruto started as he softly grabbed both of her arms. Being alone is a terrible fate that no one should have to endure. I know firsthand what it is like. Yet there is a cure for such a condition, Naruto finished as he leaned back with a smile. What is it? Noma asked with a certain sense of urgency to her question. Admittedly, her teammates had never seen her act quite like this before. She had always seemed shy and insecure, and never had they known that she had grown up alone. She seemed completely unlike the kind of person to grow up like that. They stand on every side of you, Naruto answered her simply as he leaned back and opened his arms, motioning to everyone that stood behind her. She turned around to see the smiling and shocked faces of everyone present. Every single person that was there had a smile for her, and she realized there and then that she had always had those that cared about her. She had just always been ignorant of such facts. And now if you want, you can even have me, Naruto said as he stood back up again, smiling as the girl whipped around, teary-eyed, and latched onto his half-kneeling form, effectively stopping him from getting up from the ground. Somewhat surprised, Naruto lowered himself down again, and the girl worked her arms around his form tighter, almost as if afraid that he might not really be there at all. He knew that feeling and did not think it appropriate to try and work her off of him. He knew her pain, and he knew his own coping would be different from hers. If this was her way, then he would help her. Slowly he stroked the hair of the girl, hugging into him so tightly whilst whispering words of comfort into her ear. She was crying, yet at the same time she was laughing. Never doubt the power of your friendship. In times of hardship they will help you through your darkest hour. Never forget those that you care about. Fight for them to the greatest of your ability. That was my ninja way. And look how I turned out, Naruto joked to the form still hugging him tightly, and felt the movements as she giggled against his chest. The scene before many of them struck a chord within many of their hearts. Even some of the men were standing and finding whole new levels of respect for the man that Naruto had become. To grow to a level where he could relate his own pain to that of someone younger than him only made him that much of a greater man in many of their eyes. The women, however, found that this considerate gentleman that called himself Naruto was downright appealing. Who doesn't love a man who can be compassionate? After a few more moments of Naruto simply allowing the girl to hug into him, she finally relinquished her grip on him. Naruto looked up again with his smile on his face. The girl he had been hugging into moved back over to her position between her friends, where she received hugs from both girls, as if in assurance. Now, as I was saying, since I do believe that you all know about the Fourth Shinobi War, right? Naruto asked mainly the three girls, all of whom nodded their heads, Noma even more vigorously than she usually did. Well, ever since that has ended I have been traveling all over the world mastering techniques, whilst at the same time going on a personal mission to put my own soul at peace and my greatest friends at rest, Naruto said as he held a hand over his heart before he continued. In all basic terms, I guess you could say I became a somewhat Sharingan hunter. When Madara's lab was broken into, many of the Sharingan he had collected were stolen, and I hunted them down, Naruto continued, and caused a fair few of those present to stand and stare at him in awe. Just who have you been hunting down exactly? Enko asked, barely able to contain herself. This specimen of a man before her was testing her patience in all the right ways, even if it was completely unintentional. Naruto took a moment to ponder over the names of some of the foes he had had to face in the past. Terakajiruga, Menzetsu, and recently Haruza Kuroha, Naruto said while his attention had been aimed at the sky while pondering. Those are the only ones I can think of off the top of my head, Naruto said, as he brought his eyes back to eye level with everyone again. Or he would have, if everyone's eyes were even at the same level as his. Currently half of them on the ground, along with their owners, who had body planted at those three names. Kurenai was first back on her feet, having her daughter covering her own face in disbelief at her mother's antics. It was not so bad that they all done it, but still the fact still stood. Although such reactions to those names intrigued her. Are you telling us that you took on the self-proclaimed Akatsuki, the scourge of Kumogakure, and the original Zetsu? Kurenai asked in a mixture of fear and complete and utter awe. All three had been widely regarded as the prime level of missing ninja. They were all double SS class missing ninja, earning them all a flea on sight status, not seen since the legendary yellow flash of Konoha. Naruto cocked his head to the side in confusion. They were sure making a big thing out of this. Sure. I mean, they all had Sharingan and therefore were a threat to peace, Naruto answered back as if it made complete sense to him that he fought such powerful opponents. Enko felt her self-control really faltering at that point in time. She was sure that she would have taken him there, and then if it were not for the fact that Kurenai would no doubt stop her. Ino watched as Naruto spoke and could not believe the transformation that he had gone through in a matter of days. Naruto seemed completely back to normal now, but she worried this was all still just a mask he was putting on for the sake of them all. As everyone just stared at Naruto once again for his latest comment, his eyes looked over all of them as he rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. His eyes fell upon the azure orbs of Ino, and she was afforded the sight that Naruto had been trying to hide. She saw the flash of sadness that crossed his eyes, but just as instantly as she had saw it, it disappeared again. She had definitely seen it, however, and it would be getting brought up in the future. She was under orders to make sure that he was alright after all. How can you act so humble about taking on such strong opponents? Lee asked as Neji nodded alongside him. Naruto turned to both men with a smile on his face, which they were both shocked to notice that they were barely able to see through, although his face told them he was happy. His eyes told a whole different picture. I do not enjoy taking lives, I only done that mission in order to put Sasuke's soul to rest, Naruto responded softly. Ino clicked instantly, and could see the signs that Naruto was flailing. He may have appeared fine, but from what she was currently viewing, it appeared as though something to do with Sasuke was going to be a trigger. Naruto continued to smile, while his eyes desperately wanted to cry. He did not want his friends to be aware of the pain he felt, and aimed to keep it hidden within him until he could find a way to rid himself of the pain. It was and always would be his coping method. So tell me, what have all of you guys been up to? You know my story. I want to know all of yours, Naruto said, desperately trying to change the subject. Although he tried his hardest not to, his voice did indeed sound desperate, and they all knew it, even the three girls. Not wanting to make him aware that they heard his desperation, they simply complied. They could see his attempts at holding up a mask and knew he wanted to protect them. As such, they would not trample on his wishes. Well, Foxy-chan, there has definitely been a lot of things going on around here, obviously. Enko chimed in instantly, being the first to try and defuse the situation. She hated tense atmospheres and those she cared enough about in pain. Right now both were present, and she wanted to fix both, only one being capable of fixing at that moment and time. Naruto, however, smiled at Enko due to the nickname she had given him. Foxy-chan, not one I've heard before, but I do not deny that I like it, Naruto said honestly as all of the kunoichi looked to Enko jealously. She was already one up on all of them. She just grinned at them victoriously, if only to try and hide her knowledge of his current state. She moved over to him slowly and winked at him before placing her hand on his cheek and bringing her face agonizingly close to his own. Their lips almost touching, she spoke again. Well, if you are not busy later on, maybe we can meet up and you can have me screaming that name to you? Enko asked seductively as everyone in the area almost blew their heads off from blood loss. Had Jiraiya been there, he might even have been comatose or speaking about how he liked Enko. She had half expected him to either jump back in surprise or stand stock still in surprise. What she had not expected was for his composure to change very little. Enko-chan, if you are trying to seduce me, it may be working, yet I do believe that we may put it off for another time, yeah? Naruto asked her, leaning in even closer and causing Enko to lean back in surprise. With a victorious smirk, Naruto leaned back to normal and left a fuming Enko in the process. She simply could not believe that she had been beaten at her own game. What had the world come to? Wow, Naruto, congratulations, Enko. You are losing your touch, Kurenai pointed out matter-of-factly, to which Enko turned to her friend with a pout on her face. That's not fair, Kurenai-chan. He cheated. He isn't supposed to do it back to me. Enko complained while she stomped her foot for added effect. Kurenai simply smiled at the antics of her friend, while everyone else in the area was only just regaining their composure. The antics of Enko were to be expected, but the manner in which Naruto had dealt with her was no less than a wonder. Ino was reassessing her theory of his sexiness from when he had saved her. He was definitely sexy, and he knew how to play the seduction game, even as far as to beat one of its highest caliber players. I do believe that he said you would get back to it some other time, however? Kurenai asked slowly, only to have a smug grin fall on the face of Enko as she turned to Naruto again. I will hold you to that one, Foxy-chan, Enko said as she winked at him, surprised only when Naruto then winked back at her. That's right. You all saw it. I'll be the first to bag him. Enko cried out victoriously as she received looks of envy from many of the female populace and a confused look from Naruto. That was mixed in with slight fear. Of course he knew what she meant, yet feared what else she may do to him. Back to the subject at hand. What have I been missing then? Naruto asked as everyone diverted their attention back upon the ladies' man. Well, I guess one of the important ones would be that I am now the head of the Hyuga family, with Niji-kun being the new head of the branch family, Hinata said quietly, which had Naruto looking over to her with an ecstatic smile on his face. Hinata, that's brilliant. Well done to you too, Niji. Naruto cheered to them both, receiving appreciative smiles and nodding heads from both mentioned. Hinata did have slight pink coloration to her cheeks too. This Naruto noticed, and knew the source. Thank you, Naruto. We are at least a closer clan now. Ever since Hinata has come to the head position, she has brought the branch family closer to the main branch, Niji said as he smiled at his cousin. Naruto approved wholeheartedly of the new Niji. He was a much nicer man than he had been a boy. That's good. At least you were able to do what you wanted to, Hinata. I'm glad you were able to realize your dream, Naruto said as he once again smiled at Hinata and Niji. Tenten, Niji and I have taken on genin pupils during your absence, Naruto kunly said, which caused Naruto to then look at him. He smiled at the three. They had already gone on to take on genin in under 6 years. That showed both their level of skill and their level of maturity. That's great news, guys. I hope that your teams do well. Naruto responded happily, making all of the three senseis smile at his childlike antics. They were able to fool themselves even for a moment that the Naruto that they all knew may very well be back. Most of them, however, were not going to be over-optimistic, and as such continued on. I became the head of my clan, that is after I had to fight my mom for the right to become the alpha male. That was rather awkward. Also, Akamaru here is a father now. Meet little Akamari, Kiba explained as he indicated to the small tuft of red fur on Akamaru's back. Akamaru also moved his head to check up on his offspring, and at that moment Naruto saw the small tuft of fur lift its head. Despite himself, he was finding it almost as hard as many of the women in the area not to scream kawaii. Kiba, can I have it? Naruto asked honestly as he reached out for the small bundle of red fur. Kiba smacked his hand away whilst shouting in anime style with pointed teeth. No you can't, he's barely even a few weeks old. Kiba yelled as he pointed to Naruto, who smiled back innocently, and eventually laughing at the way Kiba had acted. I was only joking. Good to see you are just as easy to wind up as before, Kiba, Naruto said cheekily as Kiba brought back his fist to punch Naruto, while a tick mark had appeared on his head. He was only stopped due to the hand of his teammate grabbing onto his arm and effectively halting him dead in his tracks. Kiba-kun, you will only get yourself hurt, Shino admonished his comrade quickly before he turned his own attention to Naruto. My apologies, Naruto-san. Anyway, I am proud to admit that I have attained the rank of assistant head of the torture and investigation unit, Shino continued as Naruto stared at him blankly for a moment before eventually turning to Anko. The guy is telling you the truth, Foxy-chan. He is assistant head alongside me. The only one above us both is Ibiki, Anko explained as she had crossed her arms across her chest, pushing her bosom out that bit more. Naruto, however, had looked away from her after she finished, and Anko growled slightly. Kurenai leaned over and whispered into her friend's ear. He's good. He's both managed to beat you at your own game and shown complete resilience to your charm. I think you're gonna have a fight on your hands here, Kurenai whispered while Anko slowly nodded her head in agreement. Wow, I would never have thought that you would go into the torture division, Shino, although who am I to judge? Naruto said as he shrugged his shoulders. Shino was not too bothered, to be honest. Many of his comrades, and even some within his own family, had been surprised at his place of work. However, he had managed to evolve his Kikai insect colony to be able to extract information from a person's memory and upon death release these memories into his own. The process was long and complicated, but only had to be resorted to if he could not make the person spill beforehand with his techniques of persuasion. Looks like I'm next, don't it, Naruto-kun? Sakura asked as his eyes landed on her. She was looking at him through soft-looking emerald eyes, and Naruto wondered just why she was being so nice to him. If anything, he expected nothing less than scorn from the woman he once loved and made a promise of a lifetime to. She was one that he was going to have to speak to in private afterwards and was not too enthusiastically looking forward to it. I guess so, Sakura-chan, Naruto responded as he forced a smile onto his face. Although Sakura could see this and felt the pain realizing he was forcing a smile for her when he had not appeared to do so for most everyone else, she still continued. Onwards. Well, I am the head of the Medic Nin Squadron now. We have got our own corps now and I have been appointed the head of it. Only Tsunade-sama is above me in authority there, Sakura answered, feeling the slightest bit of pride in being the first commander of the Medic Nin Squad. Naruto though did look genuinely surprised and maybe even proud after she had said that. I didn't even know there was such a thing created. Well done you, Sakura, for becoming such an important figure in the Shinobi Corps now, Naruto said, proud this time with his smile not seeming quite so strained, but they could all definitely see it. Although he sounded proud in his mind, he was having an internal battle. After the promise he had made to Sakura, he had half expected her to be angry with him after failing in what he had promised her. He expected her fury, but through the way she was acting just now it was almost like she did not care anymore. Like all he had done had been for naught. It was that, or she was holding in her fury and silently hated him. And that was something he felt was even worse than her simply not caring. If she hate him, then he preferred that he know directly. Naruto looked away from Sakura and looked around all of the faces around him. He smiled at them all before he spoke. Sorry to leave you guys, but I'm feeling really tired and I want to sleep. Hospital beds aren't really comfortable and I want to just rest a bit. I've already overexerted myself today, Naruto explained as everyone nodded their head to him. They all knew that he was anything but tired and wished to be away from whatever it was that had him saddened, but they could not quite pinpoint what exactly it was that caused his sadness. Naruto walked away from the assembled people and put his hands into his pockets. Ino turned to Anko and Kurenai and nodded to both women. You go and make sure the Gaki is alright. It's what you were asked to do after all, Anko said to her simply while Kurenai nodded her head alongside her friend. Ino then looked down to her three students and knelt down to speak to them. Girls, Sensei has to go and speak to Naruto about something important. You are free to do as you wish for the rest of the day, Ino said to them, at which Kyoki and Hika jumped around happily before racing off. Noma took a moment to look at Ino before doing anything. Ino noticed her hesitation and smiled to her adorable student. Don't worry, I'll make sure that he is alright. Next time you see him he will be happy again, Ino said as Noma then nodded her head before moving off to catch up with her teammates. Ino then stood straight again and went to move off before she felt a hand grabbing at her arm. Turning around she found that to her utmost surprise that it was Mato guy that had stopped her. Ino-chan, I know what it is that troubles young Naruto-kun. What he needs the most just now is comfort from one he cares about, and one that cares about him deeply enough. This will be a delicate time for him. You must be careful what you both say and do around him. One wrong move and you can cause him to create a shell within himself and crawl into it, Guy said in a completely serious tone. In all honesty, Ino found that a serious guy was a scary guy. Hey, how can you know so much about this guy, Sensei? Tenten asked her sensei from her genin days, only to have the man turn to her with a sad smile adorning his face. All I shall say is that I have known Kakashi for a very long time, and I myself have been through a similar time in my own lifetime, Guy answered, leaving most of the younger generation speechless. Those of the older generation knew this though. Those were some very, very dark days for him. Just make sure that he is alright, okay, Ino-chan? Guy almost pleaded of her just as Tsunade had done not only a few nights ago. It seemed everyone was worried deeply about the blonde. Okay Guy-sensei, I'll try my best to make him feel better. I mean after all, I do owe him for what he has done for me and even my team too, Ino said as she looked to where Naruto was slowly diminishing and getting away from her before very quietly, adding, I better hurry or else I am going to lose him. He doesn't even have his old apartment to go to, Ino said almost to herself before she took off sprinting after the blonde-haired man who had many of his comrades worried about him. Do you think Foxy-chan will be alright? I mean from what I heard the death of Sasuke hit him really badly and he hasn't been quite right ever since returning, Anko said to Kurenai, who honestly did not have an answer to Anko's question. Naruto has a high level of resilience, of that there is no doubt, but I do think that what will really determine whether or not Naruto-kun recovers from such a shock to his system is both how Ino-chan handles the situation and how everyone else reacts to him later on, Guy said as he recalled his past and even the time with Kakashi too. They both had each other to rely on during those dark days and as such were able to come out of them due to each other's help. Why won't he come out and say that he is in pain? Why does he try and make it out to us that he is fine? Kiba asked, honestly confused to how Naruto could act in such a manner. It was not through annoyance he was confused, but more bafflement. That's just the way Naruto-kun has always been. He won't let us see him in pain because he does not want us to be in any pain. It took Sai for me to realize that Naruto was suffering due to the promise he made to me, Sakura admitted as she felt heat in her eyes. Tears were threatening to fall and she did not have the willpower nor the care to try and stop them. Her tears flowed down her cheeks effortlessly as all looked on at her. They would have comforted her if it were not for the fact they felt somewhat responsible too. They had all gotten used to believing that no matter how bad things might have gotten, Naruto would always be there to save the day. They had never really taken into consideration what that could do to Naruto. He always trained his hardest in everything he did, but he was literally always fighting their battles for them. None of them were able to have pain during his invasion. Naruto had to be the one to stop him. Madara could not be stopped by any of them either. Again they had to rely on Naruto to stop that man. They had expected so much of Naruto and never thought of the consequences. Well, right now it felt as if those consequences were finally reaching the surface and very little was holding back the inevitable explosion. Ino caught up to Naruto as he was about to turn a street corner. She reached out and grabbed onto the sleeve of his coat, causing said man to stop in his tracks. He had not expected anyone to follow him and as such turned around in surprise to see a tired Ino standing directly behind him, panting heavily. Why did you have to leave in such a hurry? I mean honestly I had to sprint just to keep up with you, Ino complained as she leaned against the building to her right as she kept a firm hold of Naruto's coat. He was not escaping her easily at all, she would make sure of that. I am very tired and as such I only wish to go to my bed. I just want to go home and go to sleep. Is that so much to ask? Naruto asked softly and Ino felt a chord being struck within her heart, the desperation in his voice, his shadowed eyes. He was trying his hardest to hold back the floods but he was struggling, and he did not want any of them to see. He was far too considerate for his own good. Naruto, you can't go home, Ino said somewhat nervously and kicking at the ground softly. Naruto did not even lift his head as he asked her the question she had been waiting on. Who did it? Naruto asked. There was not even any venom or any malice within his voice. It almost sounded fed up, like he had just had enough. No one done it on purpose. The building apartment you were in was deemed too dangerous for people to live in. The Hokage had to have the building demolished, Ino said as Naruto looked to her. His eyes looked if nothing more tired. Simply and unconditionally tired. What about all of my things? Naruto asked as he realized he did not really have too much to lose if the building were to be destroyed, but he knew that there were a few important things in that building he would kill for. Ino knew what direction Naruto was going with his question. It's okay, before it was demolished Tsunade-sama herself went through your apartment, and took anything of importance to you and took them to her home, Ino said as Naruto's face seemed to relax slightly at the information. It also allowed Ino to relax slightly as his face was really serious just there now. That's okay then. I thought I might have lost some of my important treasures for a moment there, Naruto responded eventually with a tired laugh before he smiled to Ino. Well, I'm going to go home now. I'll see you later, Ino-chan, Naruto said as he made to walk off. Ino, who was momentarily shocked by those words, then shouted after him. Wait, Naruto! Where are you going? Ino asked, honestly confused. Naruto simply turned to her and smiled. This time at least he had an honest smile. Ino was seriously worrying about him. He could be sad one moment, angry another, and then happy the next. To my new estate, Ino-chan. If my apartment is gone then it's the only other place I can go, Naruto answered with his happy smile still on his face. Ino was however confused. How could Naruto have an estate? The only ones with estates were usually clans. Naruto, you don't have to lie to me. If you needed a place to stay then all you had to do was ask, Ino said as she smiled at the antics of her friend. Honestly, he was too nice to even ask that kind of request of his friend. Did he really think she would bite his head off for asking her that? Naruto had however moved to a position where he was waving his hand in front of his body desperately, as he shook his head vigorously. No. No. Honestly, I do have an estate that I can live in. You can even come with me and look. I swear to you that I have an estate to live in, Naruto cried to her, as Ino simply looked at him blankly. There was no way that Naruto could own an estate, was there? Okay, then I will come and see, just to make sure you're not trying to fool me into thinking you have a bed, when you might very well sleep on the streets, Ino said, and Naruto flinched slightly. In all honesty, had he found he had no place to live, he may very well have slept outside that night, until he could talk to the Hokage next day. He nodded his head, however, and led the way towards his intended destination, to which Ino could only guess at. As they got closer and closer to the place, Ino was still shrouded in mystery. It was a place that looked like it had not been looked at nor serviced in a very long time. The front gate was still as strong as it had been at creation at the front of the building. The building itself was majestic and large. It looked like it was fit to host royalty, or definitely someone of high standing. Ino could not work out why Naruto was here, because as far as she knew, the only time he would be like that may be if he became Hokage. But Kakashi was going to be taking that role. Naruto then moved over to a plaque on the gate that had moss or some form of material coating over it. Wiping it away, he revealed words that Ino would never be able to forget. In intricate letters, the words Namake's residence were written out, and beside it was a seal. Ino watched as Naruto deftly took out a kunai and slashed his left palm. Wiping his hand across the seal, he then lifted his hand. Naruto, why are we here at the Yandame's mansion? Ino asked inquisitively, to which Naruto turned to her and finally spoke to her after the silence all the way up to that building. His smile was on his face at least. Ino-chan, that seal that you saw was a blood seal. The gate will not open if the correct blood is not applied. It must be the blood of either an approved Hokage or Naruto left his comment hanging as he turned full to Ino with a large grin on his face. His eyes sparkled as he spoke his next few words. If someone of the same blood applies their blood to the seal, Naruto finished as the gate indeed opened and Ino stood stock, still staring at Naruto. You mean? Ino began but was unable to continue her question as the shock caught her off guard. Yep, I am the son of the Yandame Hokage and the Bloody Hanbaro. I am Naruto Uzumaki Namake's. Naruto finished as he smiled widely at Ino. What if Godlike Naruto refuses to return to Konoha? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoyed this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel. And leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.